There are now more landmines in Ukraine than almost anywhere else in the world. That's the headline that screamed from a November 2023 piece published by Vox, which went on to point out that mines are among the most underappreciated threats that Ukraine faces in its war with Russia. Red signs marked with skulls litter the Ukrainian landscape, warning soldiers and civilians alike that landmines are in the area. Ukraine isn't even safe when it retakes territory from Russia. Both as a defensive ploy and to damage Ukraine's troops as they move back in, Russia has taken to installing mines in the territory it's occupied to stifle the Ukrainian resistance. Anti-tank mines are buried in the ground, ready to trigger as they feel the weight of a tank, or in worse cases, a bus full of civilians riding over them. Booby traps are built into buildings and on disputed territory, with anti-personnel mines designed to maim and kill. Even at the more makeshift end of the spectrum, there are improvised explosives, cluster munitions, and unexploded artillery littering the Ukrainian landscape. How much of that landscape? About 67,180 square miles of it, an area roughly the size of Florida, according to Vox. So with such a massive mine threat being presented, the question becomes simple. What is Ukraine doing to tackle the landmines that are scattered all over its territory? There are many answers, some of which we'll dig into later, but one of the methods used is among the most novel methods of landmine clearing yet. Rather than relying on the latest and greatest technology, there's a small group of Ukrainians who are going back to using a form of technology that was never intended for clearing mines at all. Those groups have gone all the way back to the farmyards, and they've discovered that tractors are surprisingly powerful tools in the war against Russian landmines. In May 2023, the UK newspaper The Sun published a video on its YouTube channel. The video appears fairly innocuous, if a little weird at first. It shows a man camping out in what appears to be an excavator's bucket, which has been elevated off the ground. A lookout perhaps. It's unclear from the footage, though it's a hint that some extremely creative everyday Ukrainians have come up with a novel way to deal with the landmine problem on their land. The footage then cuts to a huge mechanical plow appearing to till a field, only that footage isn't what it appears. A shot from inside the cabin shows that the plow is unmanned and has been rigged to drive forward in a straight line with no human intervention. There's a method to the madness, of course. As the video progresses, we meet a Ukrainian farmer who tells The Sun that one of his tractors ran over an anti-tank mine. That's when he made a startling discovery. Though the mine destroyed the protective plates and much of its mechanics, the vehicle itself was safe. Those driving the tractor were unharmed. "Everyone's alive and safe," says the farmer, and the vehicle was quickly restored to head back out into the minefield. But the incident gave the farmer an idea. With that, the footage cuts back to a front shot of the supposed plow shown earlier, which shows that the vehicle isn't a plow at all. Instead, it's a tractor that appears to have been jerry-rigged with improvised armor at the front, which is running back and forth across the farmer's field on the hunt for mines. A solid metal barricade is built onto the front of the vehicle, elevated slightly on rollers to keep the tractor moving, and what appears to be two 4x4s are stacked and tied onto the sides, presumably to act as a shield for the tractor if it finds a landmine. Finally, we see the excavator from the start of the video again. The man still lies in position, appearing to control the tractor with some sort of mechanism installed in the excavator's barrel. He has a small table and chair set up, giving him a wide-open view of the field as he coordinates the tractor's movements and turns while it's on its mine-sweeping duty, all as he follows in its wake. The footage cuts back to the farmer. He explains that the reason he built this novel anti-mine solution, outside of the unexpected discovery that it would work, is that the time has come to start sowing crops. His problem was that he couldn't move forward with that work because of the risk that mines buried in his land posed. The emergency services are very busy, he explains, understandably so given the situation in Ukraine, but his important work similarly can't wait. So rather than sit around and hope that the emergency services could send some sort of minesweeping equipment to his farm, he uses the experience he gained, watching one of his tractors survive an anti-tank explosion, to create his own solutions. "We took the front metal parts from a Russian tank that was hit on the crossroads," he explains, while talking about the unique contraption he created. Those metal parts form the bulk of the tractor's defenses, with the farmer previously seen in the excavator barrel, then shown on the ground with remote control in hand, guiding the tractor's movements. In essence, the farmer has created an unmanned ground vehicle, or UGV, with little more than scraps of metal and some amazing Ukrainian ingenuity. The footage cuts away to another man, who explains the scale of the problem Ukraine's farmers face. He says that the amount of land that they need to cover and demine is huge. It would take years to demine this particular field by hand and to guarantee that there are no mines here, he says before the footage cuts back to the improvised tractor. "The wireless tractor is a very good idea," the man explains, "because there is no human inside. The risk to the life of the mechanic is negated. The tractor also clears far more territory far faster than that same land can be cleared by hand. It's also more reliable, at least in terms of getting rid of anti-tank mines. After all, it's possible to miss these mines when searching by hand because they're designed to only trigger when a heavy weight is placed upon them. The tractor provides that weight, meaning it's guaranteed to set off an anti-tank mine if it encounters one. That same person explains the true scale of the problem. We learned that he is in Kharkiv, a region that Russia has been bombing since at least May 2024, despite assurances from Russian President Vladimir Putin that he has no interest in attacking the region. That month saw somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 soldiers cross the border between Kharkiv and Russia at two key points, according to The Guardian, and the region has been under siege ever since. More Russian men are pouring in. Kharkiv is being battered with artillery, and as the farmers and military personnel in the Sun's video explain, their land is now being littered with Russian landmines. "I removed around 500 anti-tank mines and numerous anti-personnel mines in this field," claimed the man, showcasing just how difficult Russia is making it for Ukraine's farmers to do their work. Don't underestimate the importance of this tactic. According to Statista, agriculture accounted for 8.2% of Ukraine's GDP in 2022, a figure that's likely decreased substantially with Russia littering the country's farmland with landmines. The video ends with footage of the unique tractor driving through shelled-out areas of Kharkiv. Broken buildings line the landscape, serving as a reminder that, for as novel as the farmer's anti-mine solution may be, he's still living and working in a region that's under constant threat of Russian attack. Reporting on the same farmer in May 2023, Reuters is able to offer more details. It names the farmer as Alexander Kristov, who is the general manager of his own agricultural company. Kristov lives in Rakova, a village that Russia managed to occupy during the early months of the war, before a Ukrainian counteroffensive pushed the war's front lines back and gave Kristov a chance to continue his work. The report also quotes Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, who claims that the problem Kristov faces is far from unique. Russia has planted mines in about 30% of Ukraine's territory. Shmyhal says that Ukraine is working hard to demine its agricultural land, likely with the goal of getting its agricultural sector back up and running, even in a faltering capacity, but the scope of the work is enormous. Other farmers face similar problems. In June 2023, The Guardian similarly ran a report on the farmers and their unique solution to the Russian mine problem. It pointed out that farmland has been a clear target for Russia since the war's beginning. For instance, it spoke to one farmer who said that in the weeks that Russia occupied the Husarivka dairy farm, they've slaughtered 2,500 heads of cattle. Most died due to artillery fire or the Russians simply using them as target practice. The farm's deputy manager, Serhiy Forobyov, claims that the cows that weren't killed were instead starved. The farmers were forced to abandon their land when the Russians came, with Forobyov noting that some of the cows became so hungry that they started to eat their own tails for sustenance. Now, he says, they're just like the soldiers who've been on the front line. They're scared if you just go near them. When his farm was finally liberated by Ukrainian soldiers, Forobyov claims there were cow carcasses as far as the eye could see. And even with Russian soldiers gone, he now faces the same problem as so many other Ukrainian farmers: mines in his land. The farm's 230 surviving cows can't be put out to pasture because of the mines, as they could theoretically trigger them. Plus, with so many buildings ruined, it's likely that Forobyov's farm will never be the same again. When we mentioned that the threat of Russia's mines often goes underappreciated at the beginning of the video, this is what we meant. Obviously, landmines present a clear risk to soldiers when attacking fortified locations, as well as to Ukrainian tanks and vehicles. Russia is using them in that capacity, somewhat expected for such a large war, but it's through this secondary strategy of laying mines on farmland that Russia can terrorize Ukrainian civilians even long after they've been pushed out of territory they'd previously taken. Russia is trying to ruin Ukraine's agricultural industry, all while potentially killing civilians whose only crime would be to return to the land that was previously taken from them. All of this brings us to a question: just how is Russia using landmines to hurt Ukraine? We've covered some of the basics already, but it's clear that these attacks on agricultural lands aren't accidental. They're a defined tactic, one that the Halo Trust says is extremely effective. The Halo Trust is an anti-landmine charity that focuses on clearing mines and similar explosives to help countries rebound after they've experienced armed conflict. Of course, the Trust has been extremely active in Ukraine since the beginning of Putin's special military operation, with its head of region in Europe, Mike Newton, noting that Russia's use of landmines on agricultural ground is a definite strategy. A large part of the economy of Ukraine has collapsed, Newton says, echoing the previous statistic about how agriculture makes up 8.2% of the country's GDP. Ukraine is traditionally one of the breadbaskets of the world, but the country's prime agricultural land has been decimated by bombs, artillery, shells, and landmines, he says. Those landmines have to be removed if Ukraine is to be rebuilt. The Halo Trust believes that it's a gargantuan task. Beyond the sheer amount of land that these mines have been installed into, it believes that there may be up to 2 million of the explosives dotted around Ukraine. For all its hard work, the Halo Trust has barely put a dent in that number. Its highly trained deminers have been scouring Ukraine by hand, with that slow and steady effort leading to the clearing of just 19,000 landmines and similar unexploded munitions. Their work is currently focused on more built-up areas, with schoolyards, pathways, housing estates, and fields combining to form the majority of the Halo Trust's work. The mere mention of schoolyards there should give you pause for thought. The Trust is clearing mines away from locations that are meant for children. Human Rights Watch, or HRW, delves into even more detail. In June 2023, it published a report covering the full use of landmines in Ukraine. It notes that the 1997 Mine Ban Treaty prohibits the use of anti-personnel mines that are capable of killing or injuring people, a ban Russia is clearly violating. Of course, it's also worth noting that Russia never signed the treaty, with China, the US, and over 20 other nations also not being signatories. HRW says that Russia is known to have used at least 13 types of anti-personnel mines in Ukraine since the war began, though Ukraine isn't innocent in breaking the act either. It's using rocket launchers to fire PFM anti-personnel blast mines, meaning it's essentially fighting fire with fire in its war with Russia. Ukraine, by the way, is a signatory of the 1997 Mine Ban Treaty. On top of this, Russia is using at least 6 types of anti-vehicle mines, allowed under the 1997 Mine Ban Treaty, as well as several types of improvised booby traps that are typically set up in places that Russia had fortified before being driven away. The majority of the anti-personnel mines Russia uses are fragmentation mines, meaning they explode in such a way with shrapnel flying in multiple directions. A couple, including the PFM-1, PMN-2, and PMN-4, are blast mines designed to cause severe injury or death to a single person, typically when that person places pressure on the mine. Rather than adapting to meet Ukrainian resilience head-on, Russia's response has been to escalate the use of increasingly inhumane tactics. The so-called creativity in their landmine usage only highlights Putin's desperation in the face of Ukraine's unyielding strength. In February 2024, NBC News reported on the landmine situation in Ukraine, noting that Russia has started using a deadly new type of anti-personnel mine called the POM-3. In addition to detonating when pressure is placed upon it, much like a traditional mine, the POM-3 is equipped with seismic sensors that can recognize vibrations in the ground. Those vibrations could be caused by soldiers marching, vehicles driving, or simply farmers attempting to prepare their land for planting. These seismic sensors make the mines much more difficult to both locate and disarm, as they're designed to explode before a person actually touches them. When the POM-3 detects vibrations in the ground, it fires an explosive about the size of a soft drink can into the air. This explosive releases metal fragments, firing them far and wide to take out any people in the vicinity. It's a terrifying weapon. And it shows just how far Russia is willing to go to hurt Ukrainians, any Ukrainians, in its effort to complete Putin's special military operation. Hurting Ukrainians is exactly what these mines have achieved. Landmines have been a problem in Ukraine even before the special military operation began. Between 2014, the same year Russia annexed Crimea, and 2020, Ukraine experienced 1,190 casualties related to landmines, amounting to about 170 casualties per year. That number has increased markedly since the beginning of the war, with the period between February 2022 and July 23 resulting in 298 civilian casualties, with 22 of those being children. That's on top of 632 civilian injuries, and without mentioning the many more soldiers that have been caught by landmines or Russia's improvised booby traps. Worst of all, the Halo Trust believes that the civilian numbers are massively underreported, meaning it's very possible that hundreds more Ukrainians have died due to Russian mines. Statista breaks down the numbers and offers some more interesting details to illustrate just how widespread landmine usage has become since the beginning of the war. It suggests that the period between April and December 2014 saw 40 Ukrainian civilians killed and another 40 injured by mines. Those numbers rose considerably in 2015, in the immediate aftermath of the Crimea annexation, to 123 killed and 240 injured. The next 2 years also saw significant landmine deaths, with 122 deaths and 361 injuries between 2016 and 17. The numbers taper off from around 2018 through 22, though Ukraine still hit double-digit mine-related deaths in all of those years. Then 2022 saw the numbers rocket back up to 223 deaths and 374 injuries from landmines. The numbers for 2023 were just as bad, with 116 deaths and 383 injuries. And remember, as the Halo Trust points out, these are just the reported numbers. There are likely many more civilians dead, not to mention the many soldiers that have likely been caught up by Russia's explosive traps. Suddenly, the farmer's innovative remote-controlled tractor seems less like a novelty and more of a necessity, a way for that farmer to protect himself and his workers from the scourge of landmines that have been laid in his field. Of course, this doesn't mean we're going to see fleets of remote-controlled tractors patrolling the fields and countrysides of Ukraine anytime soon. That's impractical and requires hundreds of people to demonstrate the same ingenuity that Alexander Kristov displayed. That's not to mention the sheer number of tractors required, as well as the luck of running across a destroyed Russian tank. So what other methods is Ukraine using to tackle the problem? Many, as it happens, with most of them being far more technologically advanced than the armored tractor Kristov created. For instance, Putin's special military operation marks the first time that artificial intelligence, or AI, has been used to detect landmines. In April 2024, IEEE Spectrum reported on a startup company called SafePro AI. That company was called to a 25-hectare field, the same size as 62 American football fields, to test a new drone-based technology it developed. The task was simple. The UN would spread between 50 and 100 inert mines across the field. SafePro AI then had to use its drones, which are powered by the company's machine learning software, to detect as many of those mines as possible in 72 hours. The drones took just 5 hours. By the end, they gathered over 15,000 images, all later used to further train the machine learning model that powers them. A further 2 hours of coding led to that model crunching through the visual data. Sadly, the model wasn't capable of producing a map with precise coordinates for each suspected landmine. So SafePro AI adapted and instead had it create a map highlighting the general suspected locations of each mine. An imperfect solution perhaps, but one that would certainly be useful to Ukrainians in their efforts to disarm mines or to simply keep people away from areas believed to contain the weapons. Finally, SafePro AI successfully identified the general locations of 74 mines and was invited back by the UN to conduct more tests. It's not the only AI company that's using its technology to help clear landmines in Ukraine. In June 2024, AI Magazine ran a piece on Amazon Web Services, or AWS, which has teamed up with the previously mentioned Halo Trust to work on ways to use AI and machine learning to identify mines in Ukraine. AWS has invested $4 million into the project, which has seen the Halo Trust take a similar approach to SafePro AI in using drones to scan the Ukrainian landscape. In this case, the landmine clearing organization has a fleet of 542 drones, which have collectively captured around 11 terabytes of high-resolution images to be fed into the AWS machine learning models to help it detect landmines. The Halo Trust is also using AWS models to examine satellite imagery to locate damaged buildings, with that damage also being a possible indicator of landmines in a location. Neither of these technologies is a finished product, by the way. But just as Russia is building landmines that contain seismic sensors, using modern technology to make their landmines more dangerous than ever, so are other organizations using more advanced technology to detect those new landmines. Still, the widespread use of AI to find mines is something that we may not see until later in the war. What about the other things that Ukraine is doing to find the mines in its territory? Metal detectors are still the most common methods for finding mines, along with landmine probes and animals that are capable of sniffing out explosives. That's according to Tim Bechtel, who's a geophysicist at Pennsylvania's Franklin and Marshall College. He's working alongside NATO scientists to develop a new form of metal detector, a fleet of autonomous robots that can handle the detection part for humans so that they only have to put themselves at risk while deactivating the mines. Bechtel says, the most common anti-vehicle mine is the TM62M. It's got a metal casing, so it's very easily found with a metal detector. Anti-personnel mines are a lot smaller, but most of the Russian mines, even if they have plastic casings, still contain significant metal. Using metal detectors to find these mines is risky, even when robots are thrown into the mix. And of course, 4 robots can't cover the massive territory in which Russia has installed mines in Ukraine. Still, it's one more solution, adding to the ever-growing pile. Another comes back to drones. The Smithsonian Magazine says that a 17-year-old engineer named Igor Klimenko has cooked up his own drone-based solution to dealing with landmines. The outbreak of the Ukraine war caused him to revisit a passion project from his past, resulting in him creating a drone capable of not only detecting unexploded landmines, but sending their precise coordinates to the user. The result was his quadcopter mines detector, a project on which he worked with programmers and scientists while finishing his senior year of high school, which now has a pair of patents and 2 working prototypes. The prototypes earned Klimenko the Chegg.org Global Student Prize, which comes with a $100,000 prize for making an impact on the lives of his peers. The drone combines traditional metal detecting methods with drone technology. Using an F-5 Pro quadcopter as the base, Klimenko essentially strapped a metal detector to the bottom, which hangs suspended underneath as the drone flies. From there, the drone can stay suspended for up to 30 minutes and travel up to 5 miles, picking up on landmines as it goes. More investments and refined technology solutions could improve both of those limitations in time. But as it stands, Klimenko's drone is yet another example of the ingenuity of the Ukrainian people in the face of Russia's mine threat. Then there are the mine-clearing monsters. That's what Real Clear Defense calls a host of Western devices that have been sent into Ukraine to help it combat the scourge of mines in its territory. These devices, of which there are about 100, take one of two forms. There's a plow clearing machine, which is somewhat similar to the jerry-rigged tractor solution that plows the land to uproot mines. One example is the American M1150, which is the same chassis as an Abrams tank and is capable of throwing down M58 Miklik explosive lines up to 328 feet in front of itself to clear a path. Unfortunately, these plow machines are loud and bulky. The M1150 weighs over 70 tons, making them easy targets for Russian missiles and artillery. The other mine-clearing monster uses flails, with Germany's Wiznet 1 being a prime example. Like the M1150, it's built using a tank chassis, a Leopard instead of an Abrams, but it's lighter at 44 tons and uses a series of flails to whip the ground and explode any mines it finds. Ukraine has 56 of these Wiznet 1s, which can move at top speeds of 31 miles per hour. Unfortunately, they also offer an imperfect solution, as they only have a typical clearance rate of between 50 and 60% of mines in an area. Still, they are yet more tools Ukraine can add to its demining arsenal. And if all of that doesn't work, the country can take another approach. If you can't beat them, join them. Given that Russia is peppering Ukraine's landscape with mines to take out vehicles and tanks, Ukraine has taken to using the same tactic. In February 2023, Forbes writer David Axe reported that Ukrainian soldiers have started relaying mines in old minefields that Russian soldiers have previously cleared, essentially creating a field of fresh mines ready to explode when Russia attempts to cross. This leads to a pattern wherein a lead Russian vehicle will get taken out by a mine the Russians believe they'd cleared, with the vehicle dramatically exploding. The rest of the tank column ends up scattering, with some attempting to go around the lead vehicle while others go in different directions, only to run into more mines. Even a retreat is made more challenging, as there could be more mines that have been relayed behind the tanks after they progressed. Add the scattering of more mines into these old fields from the air, and you have a dangerous combination that's claimed the lives of hundreds of Russian soldiers so far. Still, it's a tactic that only makes the issues of landmines in Ukraine worse, even if the Ukrainians know where these fresh mines are being placed. Where does all of this leave us? Russia clearly sees landmines, both anti-personnel and anti-tank, as a key way to not only fight against Ukrainian soldiers, but to wreak havoc among its civilian population. That tactic has forced levels of ingenuity rarely seen in times of war. Of course, there are more militaristic and technological methods being developed to take out these mines. AI is slowly proving itself useful in detection, though it requires further development. And with the mine-clearing monsters coming in from the west, Ukraine at least has a handful of machines that are capable of clearing mines faster than can be done by hand with traditional metal detectors. But it's the everyday citizens who are coming up with their own solutions that are most impressive. Some of those solutions combine modern technology with traditional mine-clearing techniques, such as we see with Igor Klimenko's metal-detecting drones. But even in the absence of that technology, people like Alexander Kristov are figuring out ways to use what they have available to make their land a little safer. His combination of a tractor, old Russian tank armor, and an impressive remote control system means that he's able to detect mines on his land, get rid of them, and start working again within an agricultural sector that is on its knees due to the Russian invasion. Perhaps we'll see variations of his tractor in wider use in the future. But for now, we want to hear your opinions. What do you think about Ukraine's mine-detecting tractor, and how much of a role do you think mines will play both during and after the Ukraine war? Cardboard drones. Sounds like a joke, right? Yet, these unassuming creations have become a nightmare for Russian forces, capable of obliterating jets and turning the tide in modern warfare. How did something so simple become so deadly? Putin's plans for an easy victory in Ukraine were shattered by a new era of warfare. His pride in a supposedly modernized military and an impressive tank fleet couldn't withstand the relentless onslaught of large and small drones, transforming many of those tanks into smoldering ruins. Despite their experience from the Armenia-Azerbaijani conflict, the Russian invaders were woefully unprepared for the drone warfare they faced. By the second half of 2023, Russia sought to dominate the drone warfare arena, making significant strides. But in early 2024, Ukraine reclaimed its lead, refusing to rest on its laurels. With their nation's survival at stake, Ukrainians pushed innovation to its limits in the drone race. One of their groundbreaking innovations? The easily concealable cardboard drone. Dismissed by some as a mere gimmick, this drone has proven lethal, downing Russian jets and redefining combat strategies. Curious about how a cardboard drone, nicknamed the Origami of Death, could wield such power? Let's explore its design, operational use, and its profound implications for the future of drone warfare. As a preview for what this Origami of Death can do, it might be best to look at the words of one of Russia's military bloggers, who was writing in August 2023, shortly after $100 million worth of aircraft went up in smoke to a Ukrainian drone attack. Tonight, Ukrainians use them in a swarm, mixing drones with warheads with empty drones. I don't know exactly what engines were on the drones, but if they were electric-powered, then they were not launched from Ukraine. But these drones were indeed launched from Ukraine. What model actually caused such damage? The drone in question is called the Corvo Precision Payload Delivery System (PPDS), manufactured by an Australian company called SnipeX Systems in cooperation with the Australian Army. Australia has been a steady supporter of Ukraine in its resistance against Russian aggression, delivering a total of $960 million worth of aid in the first 2 years of the war. This aid has involved counter-drone systems like the Slinger kinetic defense system, which is designed to detect and shoot down fast-moving small drones. But the Australians are helping Ukraine in offensive aspects of drone warfare as well. In July 2022, the Australian government launched an initiative to supply Ukraine with the PPDS drone. The initiative was part of a $1.1 million contract, and SnipeX has been exporting the PPDS to Ukraine since March 2023, when the drone was revealed at the Avalon Air Show. SnipeX is shipping the units to Ukraine at a rate of at least 100 per month. Supplying Ukraine with the PPDS is SnipeX's only focus for that market, which is an indication of its success there. The company sells these drones in pizza box-sized containers that can carry 24 at a time. When they arrive in Ukraine, PPDS drones are stacked and flat-packed, an arrangement which makes them easy and efficient to deliver. 24 of the drones can come in one package. They are then assembled using rubber bands. The drones come with personalized launchers. These are small catapults that propel the PPDS into the sky. If no launcher is available, someone can throw it into the air. The company is understandably secretive about the material the PPDS is made from, but it seems that the drone isn't actually made of common cardboard, but rather a wax-coated foam board. It's also easily repairable because damaged parts can be replaced. For example, if the drone's nose cone gets hit, the operators can replace it with a spare. The drone can also be repaired with common tools like a hot glue gun and tape, making them durable and easy to call upon in lean times. SnipeX says that the PPDS is designed for covert delivery, and perhaps more than any other drone on the market, the Origami of Death is well suited for such operations. It's designed to be stealthier than a normal drone. First, the PPDS has a size which helps to enhance its stealth profile. The central portion is about as big as a shoebox, while the wingspan is about 6.5 feet. More importantly, since the drone is made of a waxy cardboard-like substance, it's transparent to radar. The rise of stealth drones has been another innovation in UAV warfare since the conflict started. Toward the end of 2023, Russia began coloring some of its Shahid drones black to make them less visible to the eye. This coating was not just paint, but rather a specialized material to reduce visibility to radar. The Ukrainians and their Australian partners have taken this to another level with the PPDS. The drone is not completely stealthy because its electronic components, like the battery, can be detected. Nevertheless, it has a lower cross-section to radar thanks to its design and materials. The drone's operator controls the UAV through a specialized Android tablet that comes with the packaging. The PPDS can also fly autonomously if need be. It uses GPS guidance, but is resistant to jamming, because in the event the GPS goes down, the PPDS has control software that can calculate its location using the information from the drone's speed and trajectory. According to SnipeX chief engineer Ross Osborne, the PPDS can also take weather conditions into account when deciding its flight path, landing pattern, and approach. The wax coating ensures that these drones can continue operating in damp conditions, maritime environments, and even rain, assuming it's not raining cats and dogs outside. When not attacking, the drone is designed to be reused. A single PPDS drone can be reused up to 60 times for reconnaissance and surveillance missions. The material the PPDS is made of also makes it more resistant to jamming than traditional drones. At a time when both sides of the war are recognizing the importance of jamming, the PPDS might prove more important in the next phase of the conflict and for the future of drone warfare as a whole. We'll discuss this more in detail later. For now, you might be wondering, why would someone come up with the idea for a so-called cardboard drone to begin with? Why was the PPDS conceived in the first place? The PPDS was originally designed for reconnaissance and to carry supplies to frontline positions. The drone weighs 5.3 pounds when empty and can carry a payload of 6.6 pounds. The payload bay has a cover that flips up to ensure the ease of retrieval by the receiver. It's propeller-driven and can reach speeds of 37 miles per hour. The PPDS has a reported range of 75 miles. However, as we'll soon see, there is good reason to think these drones can far exceed that distance, and this reveals the first clue about the need for a cardboard drone. The PPDS's design gives it a great advantage in range over the typical rotor-based small drones that Ukraine's pilots have long favored. This is because of its light weight and fixed wing configuration. There's less drag, greater energy efficiency, and the wings generate the lift. The PPDS can fly at higher altitudes than rotor drones as well, which can add to its ability to surprise the enemy. The PPDS can land within 2 meters of its intended destination. For surveillance, the original PPDS drone came with a camera placed within the top of its nose, just above the propeller. Aside from covert delivery and surveillance, low cost is one of the things SnipeX prioritized with this drone, and the second major reason why it chose such an unusual base material. The unit price is not available on SnipeX's website, but reportedly ranges from between $670 to $3,350. Some of Ukraine's FPV drones are cheaper than this, but what makes the PPDS interesting from an economic standpoint is that it's considered a military-grade drone, according to Michael Partridge, a representative from the company. Other higher-end military-grade drones like the Shahid cost in the range of tens of thousands of dollars or more. Other military-grade drones, like the American MQ-9 Reaper, cost $30 million. Thanks to its design and construction, the PPDS drone can deliver military uses for much cheaper prices. It won't be nearly as powerful as a Shahid or a Reaper, but the low price doesn't mean this drone is ineffective. The Ukrainians have since weaponized it and turned it into an effective kamikaze drone. They began using the PPDS to attack Russian targets in June 2023, only 3 months after their initial arrival. Payloads can be of various forms of explosives, including cluster-type munitions. One Ukrainian test captured on video saw an airburst above a target that rained fragments over a broader area. This munition makes it a particularly good anti-personnel weapon, but it certainly has many anti-material uses as well, a fact which was proven in late August 2023. One of the drone's more notable feats came on August 27th, when Ukraine used the PPDS against an airbase at the historically significant site of Kursk, deep within Russian territory. Ukrainian sources reported that the strike hit a MiG-29 fighter jet and 4 Su-30 aircraft. The drones also damaged 2 Pantsir missile launchers and part of an S-300 air defense system. The governor of the Kursk area, Roman Starovoy, claimed that an apartment block has also been damaged in the drone attack. Russian sources later confirmed that the drones that hit the Kursk airfield were designed like aircraft, which would suggest that they were indeed Ukraine's origami of death. Never content to rest on their laurels, Ukraine's drone pilots used the PPDS again on the 29th, striking another airbase in Pskov, 450 miles into Russian territory. 2 Russian cargo planes were destroyed in the attack and another 2 were damaged. The attack on Pskov was part of a broader drone wave attack between the 28th and 30th, which targeted 9 Russian regions, including Moscow. The PPDS might be the so-called cardboard drone and carry less of a payload than other military-grade drones, but it still forced the Russians to disperse their remaining aircraft off their runways in the aftermath of the attacks. Comically, images taken following these incidents showed the Russians resorting to putting stacks of tires on their aircraft to prevent them from taking damage from future drone strikes. Maybe the Russians think of them as an improvised, low-cost version of the cope cage. Less dramatically, the Ukrainians have used PPDS for its intended purpose of surveillance and resupply missions. It's an ideal system to deliver ammunition to hard-pressed troops on the front line, for example, where traditional methods could prove vulnerable to enemy fire. These drones are much harder to target and ideally suited for carrying small arms, magazines of ammunition, mortar rounds, medical supplies, communications equipment, spare parts, and other essentials for infantry squads that often get overlooked. Partridge mentioned that the PPDS is designed for a blood bag. By using the drones to deliver these lighter supplies to hard-pressed troops, Ukraine does not need to risk the destruction of more expensive and valuable military vehicles that cost a lot more money and can carry heavier equipment. The aforementioned attributes are not the final ones for the PPDS. SnipeX is improving the drone based on feedback from its Ukrainian operators. A high-profile Ukrainian delegation, including Kyiv's ambassador to Australia, made a visit to SnipeX in early 2023, shortly after the drones began arriving. The ambassador, Vasyl Maryshenko, was full of praise for the cardboard drone. "It looks like something that kids would play with, but when you see what it can do, it's really amazing. They've been very good at inflicting lots of damage on the enemy." The company itself suggests that the PPDS is still in development. Initial trials had to be halted thanks to the disruption brought by the COVID-19 pandemic. Initially, there was some interest in the PPDS among Middle Eastern countries, which wanted to use it as a cheap way of carrying weapons. However, the Ukrainians have obviously used it in far more complicated missions. The dialogue between the Ukrainian armed forces and SnipeX has provided significant feedback, and the company is using it to improve the mission planning system, user interface, and ground control station, not just for the PPDS, but the entire line of Corvo drones. Partridge spoke about this collaboration with Defense News. The Ukrainians are using it in certain ways. The most effective way we're hearing about is they're literally cutting holes in the bottom and putting GoPros on 10-second timers. They've got active imagery that's 30 minutes old for a very cost-effective way of doing that. For reconnaissance and resupply missions, the GoPro cameras take these 10-second clips at the moment the drone reaches the turnaround point pre-programmed into the GPS. The Ukrainians' innovation with the GoPro cameras has added another stealthy quality to the PPDS. The quick flight and turnaround with the footage at the appropriate spot ensures there is no data link streaming the footage back to a command post. There is also no link required to give the PPDS its flight instructions. Although the lack of these data links mean that footage will not be live, it's much better for operational security, and things will most likely remain the same within 30 minutes, especially since these drones are hard to detect through visual methods or through radar in the first place. Ukraine used these methods to get accurate information about Russian positions in preparation for retaking territory in Zaporizhia. Although Ukraine failed in this offensive campaign, it still pierced the first two of Russia's defensive lines and inflicted more casualties on Russian forces, despite the latter being on the defensive. Accurate information about Russian positions was likely critical in the limited success that it had, especially when it came to neutralizing Russian tanks and artillery positions. Accurate information about Russian movements has also proven important in defensive operations, as it's permitted Ukraine to inflict heavy casualties on enemy forces in their westward drives, assisting in the war of attrition. In September 2023, SnipeX released a new version of the PPDS with a longer wingspan and higher payload at 6 kilograms or 13.2 pounds. Although these new versions are easier for the eye to detect and likely to shoot down due to their larger size, the trade-off is that they can carry more supplies for troops on the front line or, more dramatically, more powerful explosives, all while being still made of the same cardboard-like material that reduces their visibility to radar and resistance to enemy jammers. The latter is an important point because Russia has begun to signal its intention of adapting its tanks to the new reality of drone warfare. Russia has lost thousands of tanks since the war started, and Ukraine's drones are one of the biggest reasons why. Russia understands the danger its armored units are in now though, which is why in early 2024, it began rolling out a new variant of its T-72 tank. Ukrainian soldiers identified this variant as the BIZZARE electronic warfare because of the jammers it sported on its frame. These are designed to interfere with the signals of incoming drones and, in theory, should work much better than the cope cages. Ukrainian troops were understandably concerned when they began identifying these. Ukrainian soldiers then captured one of these units in April and laughably found that the jammers didn't work because they were assembled in a hasty slapdash fashion. The antennas might have been made in a factory, but the assembly left something to be desired. They were jumbled together with rope and placed hastily on wooden pallets. The result was that the BIZZARE tank that made Ukraine's drone pilots so nervous was revealed as more of a gimmick than a genuine threat, not much better than a cope cage. For the moment, Russian tanks remain as vulnerable to drones as they have been. Russia's other units are also lacking when it comes to electronic drone countermeasures. Many of the jammers Russia needs to protect its infantry units on the line do not work. One popular jammer, a 2400 model promoted by the popular Two Majors Telegram channel, does not seem to be effective for several reasons. First, its antenna are pointed directly up, when most drones come in from the side, which means it loses most of its effectiveness. The jammer also has an inadequate cooling system, which consists of a single fan bolted to the interior of a plastic case. There is inadequate ventilation for the fan to draw in cooler air and expel hot air because of this design. The jammer is so hot that it can't be touched, and interior electronic components begin to melt, making it even less effective in countering enemy drones. So in protecting its tanks and infantry or artillery formations from Ukrainian UAVs, Russia is still lagging. Its electronic warfare systems are not up to the task. To make matters worse, there has been little communication between Russia's drone pilots and electronic warfare units, resulting in many of Russia's drones being downed by their own jammers. This was one of the reasons why Russia suffered so many casualties in the Battle of Avdiivka. However, Ukraine cannot count on such incompetence continuing forever. Russia has proven surprisingly resilient in learning from its mistakes and adapting on the battlefield. This was one of the major reasons why the Ukrainians' 2023 offensive failed to replicate the success of the year before. It's reasonable to assume that the Russians will improve on their electronic warfare measures if given enough time. This is where the PPDS comes in. The cardboard drone gives Ukraine more options to adapt in the face of improvements to Russia's electronic warfare capabilities. Future PPDS units being able to carry heavier payloads will also come in handy, since more powerful explosives will give Ukraine a better chance of destroying enemy tanks. Ukraine has also made it a priority to target Russian supply vehicles in the conflict to undermine enemy logistics. Using the PPDS in the face of improved jammers gives Ukraine another means of continuing with that mission. In December 2023, President Zelensky made the construction of at least 1 million small drones in 2024 one of his government's highest priorities. Ukraine was on track to surpass that total early. The PPDS might only make up a small portion of that goal, and its speed of 37 miles per hour might be lower than the other drones in Ukraine's arsenal. However, its stealth qualities, jamming resistance, and ease of assembly and replacement make it ideal for high-profile missions, like the attack on important bases in Russian territory, and the use of these newer drones might soon be coming to other parts of the world. According to SnipeX founder George Vecino, Ukraine's success in using the PPDS has prompted interest from other countries, including the United States. This raises an interesting question. As drones become more ubiquitous on the battlefield, there will naturally be efforts to make them less detectable to radar and harder to jam. The PPDS has both of these qualities thanks to its unusual materials. So is the PPDS a sign of things to come? Will future drones be made of alternative materials to make them miniature stealth aircraft, more difficult for radar to see and harder for steadily more sophisticated jammers to bring down? August 26, 2024, Russia, still reeling from Ukraine's successful invasion of Kursk, is looking for a way to hit back. The response comes on this date, with Russia launching a large-scale missile and drone attack across Ukraine involving both cruise and ballistic missiles. It's among the largest missile strikes on Ukrainian territory since the war began. A massive volley of at least 127 missiles and 109 drones peppered the Ukrainian skies in an attack that lasted more than 8 hours. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was quick to condemn the strike, saying, "And like most Russian strikes, this one is just as dastardly, targeting civilian infrastructure," before adding a key point: Russian President Vladimir Putin can only do what the world allows him to do. That final point is a reference to Zelensky's constant calls for permission to use the long-range missiles its Western allies have provided to strike Russia on its own territory. That permission, specifically from the United States, has not come yet, with Ukraine limited to using American weapons to strike Russian territory near the Kharkiv region. It can't use missiles to strike deeper into Russia, yet. That may all be on the verge of changing as Ukraine starts a slow move away from relying on externally provided weapons. It's building a weapon of its own, completely homemade, and more than capable of striking Russia at its heart, while giving Zelensky and his troops a key advantage that could ultimately spell game over for Putin's special military operation. What is that homemade weapon? That's the question we will answer in this video as we examine the 2 missiles Ukraine is currently producing, what's made that production possible, and what having these new weapons will mean for Ukraine. But before all of that, we need to look at the background behind why these weapons matter, specifically in terms of how missiles have offered Russia such a massive advantage over Ukraine. The barrage on August 26th is far from the first time Russia has used missiles to strike Ukrainian cities. In fact, the tactic has been a feature of Putin's strategy. On February 22, 2024, the second anniversary of the beginning of Putin's special military operation, Ukrainian spokesperson Yuri Inhut pointed out that Russia had launched over 8,000 missiles during 2 years of war. That amounts to around 77 missiles per week, with many of those missile strikes being accompanied by drones. A staggering 4,630 of them, in fact, with Inhut claiming that Ukraine has managed to destroy 3,605 of those drones during the first 2 years of the war. Still, it's clear that a key Putin tactic is to constantly bombard Ukrainian cities and infrastructure with missiles, heavily burdening the country's anti-air defenses in the process. Russia claims that it only targets military facilities and energy infrastructure with these attacks. The August 26th strike demonstrates otherwise. Russian missiles have been just as destructive in major Ukrainian population hubs as they've been for the country's military locations. And it gets worse for Ukraine. While it finds itself unable to respond to these missile strikes with missiles of its own, Russia is looking further afield to keep the barrages going. On the same day that Inhut released the figures of the sheer volume of missiles his country has to face from Russia, the Security Service of Ukraine, or SBU, revealed that some of these missiles aren't of Russian origin. According to the SBU, several missile attacks launched by Russia in December 2023 involved the use of Hwasong-11 missiles from North Korea, with those missiles having injured at least 100 people while killing around 24 more. The SBU presented evidence to back up its statements, producing Hwasong-11 missile debris it claims it had found on the battlefield. The SBU says that these missiles have been used as part of the shelling of the Zaporizhia region in December 2023, with strikes against Kyiv and Kharkiv in early 2024, also featuring North Korean missiles. Add to all of this February 2024, also marking the first time that Russia used its Zircon hypersonic missile in Ukraine, and you can see the vital role missile strikes have played in Putin's strategy. All the while, Ukraine has been unable to respond. It had to rely on anti-air defenses, including a pair of Patriot missile defense systems, to try to protect its people as best it could. But outside of using missiles to attack Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014 and is still considered to be Ukrainian sovereign territory by much of the international community, Ukraine hasn't been able to fight fire with fire. Ukraine's allies have already provided some long-range weapons at this point. However, Ukraine hasn't been allowed to use them offensively. And that's been a sore point for Zelensky throughout the war. The Ukrainian president's call to be able to use the missiles its allies are providing to hit Russia in its own territory has been constant and, up until now, largely unanswered. The most recent of these calls came during a September 2024 meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, or UDCG. Held at Germany's Ramstein Air Base, the UDCG meeting saw Zelensky say that Ukraine needs to have this long-range capability, not only on the divided territory of Ukraine, but also on the Russian territory, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace. As has so often been the case, Zelensky received mild pushback from his allies. Al Jazeera reports that US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin subtly claimed that these long-range capabilities weren't needed, as he confirmed that the US would be providing an additional $250 million in military aid. He said that Russia had moved its glide bombs so far back from the front lines that they will be out of the range of American-made ATACMS missiles. What's more, Austin said Ukraine itself has significant capabilities to attack Russia in its own territory that will go well beyond the range of ATACMS or the British-made Storm Shadow missiles. Austin concluded by telling Al Jazeera that America will give everything we can, but not necessarily everything that Zelensky wants. There are a couple of ways we can read into Austin's comments. The first is how they appear on the surface. America's defense secretary seems to be telling Ukraine that it's achieved plenty of success using drones to strike deep into Russian territory. That's true. June 2024 alone saw Ukraine strike 4 Russian oil refineries with drones, with regular attacks in the Black Sea also allowing Ukraine to stop the offensive threat Russia presents from Crimea. To Austin and many of Ukraine's allies, the ability to carry out these drone-based attacks means Ukraine can already strike Russia at range. Add to that the early August invasion of Kursk, and Ukraine appears to be making a good argument for why it doesn't need long-range missiles at all. Zelensky disagrees. However, the second interpretation of Austin's comments could be that he knows something that the rest of the world doesn't. The US doesn't need to supply Ukraine with ATACMS missiles or allow them to use those missiles in Russia because Ukraine is on its way to building perfectly capable missiles of its own. And that brings us to the new Ukrainian homemade weapons. On August 26, 2024, the DW News YouTube channel published a report on Ukraine's efforts to produce its own long-range missiles. While President Zelensky lobbies for these restrictions to be lifted, Ukraine is also building its own guided missiles in the hope of one day becoming self-sufficient, the report claimed. In truth, that self-sufficiency may have come much earlier in the war, were it not for precise Russian strikes conducted in April 2022. In that month, Russia used its missiles to take out a factory that was capable of producing the same guided missiles that Ukraine is now on the verge of being able to produce once again, forcing Zelensky to make repeated pleas to his Western allies to allow him to use the missiles they provide in Russia. The strike put a severe dent in Ukraine's missile production capacities. However, DW News notes that the plant has been rebuilt and likely fortified with anti-air defenses, meaning Ukraine is now preparing to produce 2 missiles that could be real game changers in the war: the Vilka missile system and the Neptune guided cruise missile. Hints of these production capabilities first arrived in July 2024. In a short report, the TASS Russian news agency quoted Zelensky as saying, "Apart from drones, yes, we are dealing with other systems that will give us the opportunity to have a longer range. There has been some research and development." ABC built on the DW News report in late August, revealing that restarting production on the Vilka and Neptune systems wasn't all that Ukraine was up to. The research and development Zelensky mentioned in July 2024 has resulted in the creation of a missile drone dubbed the Palyanytsia, which is named after a traditional type of Ukrainian bread. That name also has a special meaning to Ukraine due to it being so difficult to pronounce that it was able to use it to weed out Russian spies during the early stages of the war. Now the name will take on a whole new meaning as it will symbolize what Zelensky calls a new class of weapon. The point here is simple. Sooner or later, Ukraine won't have to rely on its allies to provide missiles and also beg them for permission to use those missiles in Russian territory. It's building its own, a series of missiles upon which no restrictions can be placed. That brings us to another question. Just what type of damage is this trio of missiles capable of inflicting? We'll start with the Vilka. A Ukrainian-designed heavy multiple rocket launcher, the Vilka fires guided missiles and is based on the BM-30 Smerch design. It's also got a new launcher. The system entered the Ukrainian armed forces back in 2018. The weapon weighs 33 tons and is crewed by 4 people, with it firing 300mm caliber missiles from its 12 barrels. It's also road mobile. The Vilka is equipped with a YAMZ 7511.10 turbocharged engine that can get to wherever it needs to go in order to fire on Russian positions. The problem for Ukraine hasn't been that it didn't have these launchers available. Rather, Russia's April 2022 attack on its manufacturing plant rendered the Vilka useless because Ukraine didn't have the missiles the weapon could fire. Those missiles are dubbed Vilka Ms, and they can travel for up to 80 miles. As such, they're not the rangiest of missiles in the new Ukrainian homemade arsenal, though they can certainly fly far enough to cause problems behind the war's front lines. Those missiles are also cleverly designed. They use a GPS-free guidance system, which makes them immune to the type of satellite navigation jamming that can send GPS-guided missiles off course. They're also versatile. A Vilka M rocket can accept several types of warheads, with the rocket's inertial correction system ensuring the stabilization needed to keep the rocket on course. Ukraine demonstrated how it could put these missiles to good use in January 2024. That's when Ukraine conducted a firing test for its missile system, which showed that a Vilka rocket is capable of traveling significantly further than rockets fired via the M142 HIMARS systems the US has provided. Ukrainian ground forces are also reported to have used the Vilka system during their January 2024 attack on Belgorod, which you may recognize as one of the latest regions Ukraine has invaded since it experienced such success in Kursk. With its production facilities back up and running, Ukraine now has the ability to create rockets it needs for its Vilka system. That means we're likely to see a lot more of this launcher as we approach the end of 2024 and move into 25. Most worryingly for Putin, the Vilka is arguably the weakest of the 3 homemade weapons Ukraine is set to bring to the war. Far more damaging to Russia will be the R-360 Neptune guided cruise missile. Like the Vilka system, the Neptune isn't a brand new weapon. It was first introduced during the 2015 Arms and Security exhibition in Kyiv, with its first flight believed to have taken place sometime in mid-2016. With 2017 came further tests as the Neptune was put through its paces alongside the Vilka missile system, though the results of those tests weren't made public. That typically indicates that the tests showed tweaks were needed to get the missile up and running. Another test came in August 2018, this time supported by reports that the missile successfully hit a target at a range of 62 miles. More successful tests came in 2019, which is the same year that the missile was officially signed off. It would start getting delivered to the Ukrainian military in the same year. The missile has made numerous headlines since the beginning of Putin's special military operation. Early in the war, Ukraine used it to hit the Russian cruiser Moskva, with the attack ultimately leading to the sinking of one of the largest ships since World War II. More ships in the Black Sea have also been victims of Neptune missile attacks, including the Konstantin Olshansky and the Kamuna. As for the missile itself, it weighs 1,920 pounds and has an operational range of between 120 and 190 miles. It's capable of reaching subsonic speeds while delivering a warhead weighing 330 pounds. But by now you may have a question. If Ukraine has been using the Neptune since the beginning of the war, why is it being feared as a new homemade weapon? One word: modifications. In April 2024, Army Recognition reported on Ukrainian plans to extend the range of its Neptune cruise missile so that it could fly for up to 610 miles, all while it revealed that it planned to boost production tenfold. That enhanced range would allow the Neptune to strike deeper into the Black Sea region, perhaps even allowing it to reach ships docked in Crimea, and would make it invaluable for striking Russian territory if Ukraine were ever able to create a version of it that could strike land targets. That's precisely what Ukraine has done. On August 20, 2024, Army Recognition reported that Ukraine had successfully developed a version of the R-360 Neptune that's capable of traveling up to 248 miles and has been tweaked so that it can strike land targets as readily as it can hit ships at sea. The new version of the missile has even seen action already. It was reportedly used in a late-night attack on the Chelino military airfield near Kursk just a week before Ukraine launched its invasion into the oblast. So Ukraine is now capable of producing 2 types of missiles. When combined, they're capable of striking targets on both land and at sea. With the Neptune, they also have a missile that offers a good amount of range, with that range potentially being extended to over 600 miles if Zelensky's plans are anything to go by. Finally, there's the new homemade weapon. The weapon could prove superior to the ATACMS long-range missiles Ukraine so desperately wants to be able to use in Russia, the Palyantsia. Not much is known about the Palyantsia at the time of writing. When reporting on the new homemade missile, ABC News speculated that the missile would have a range of up to 430 miles, which would put it on par with the ATACMS, allowing it to solve the problems that come with Ukraine not having permission to use American-made missiles inside Russia. Ukraine's defense minister Rustem Umerov also posted about the Palyantsia on his Facebook page, noting that Ukraine is preparing its response when talking about Russia's missile attacks in late August. Weapons of its own production are coming, claims Umerov, who shared the post alongside a map showing several Russian airfields, including the Savalslyka Air Base. This led ABC News to speculate that the upcoming missile would be capable of hitting over 20 Russian airfields from Ukraine, which would put a severe dent in Russia's aerial capabilities. Speaking about the missile with the Associated Press, Mikhailo Fedorov, who serves Ukraine as its technology minister, said, "I think this will be a game changer because we will be able to strike where Russia doesn't expect it today." In other words, the Palyantsia could be seen as an expansion of the tactics Ukraine has adopted since the Kursk invasion. Defending territory is not the only thing Ukraine can do. It's going to attack Russia on its own soil, forcing Putin to completely rethink how he approaches the war that he started. The Kyiv Independent provides more details about Ukraine's revolutionary new missile drone. It quoted a defense expert named Andriy Karuk, who claims that the weapon is essentially a new type of cruise missile, because a cruise missile is an unmanned aerial vehicle with a rocket, or in this case, turbojet engine. Karuk notes that the Palyantsia is a fairly small missile too, likely meaning it will carry an explosive charge in the few tens of kilograms range rather than the several hundred seen in a standard cruise missile. Other analysts dispute Karuk's claims that the Palyantsia is essentially a cruise missile. One of them is Federico Borsari, who works at the Center for European Policy Analysis. He says the Palyantsia isn't a cruise missile because missiles fly at higher speed compared to what we know about the Palyantsia. Instead, he says it's more like a one-way drone that shares some of the characteristics typically seen in a cruise missile. Finally, Alexander Dmitriev, who is an advisor on unmanned automated systems to Ukraine's ground forces commander, highlights the key difference between the Palyantsia and a standard cruise missile. The target of a cruise missile cannot be corrected during the flight, but a drone's can, he says. That's basically the difference. In short, the Palyantsia will be able to pack a larger punch than any of Ukraine's current drones, and it will do so while taking advantage of the same electronic control technology that makes drones so flexible. So the Palyantsia is not innovative in the sense that it's introducing brand new technologies to the Ukrainian battlefield. Rather, its innovations lie in remarkable new uses of technology that already exist. The electronic control technology is adapted from traditional drones, while the lifting wings and jet-powered engines come from existing cruise missiles. Put them all together, and you get a missile that brings range, explosive power, and the ability to change its target based on an operator's commands. That's terrifying for Putin. With the Palyantsia, Ukraine completes a trio of homemade weapons that look set to devastate Russia. But that brings us to another question. When are we likely to see these missiles become common fixtures in the Ukraine war? Ukraine's Minister of Strategic Industries, Alexander Kamyshin, provided some insight during an interview with DW News. When asked how long he thinks it will be before Ukraine becomes self-sufficient, he revealed that it's not production capabilities that are stopping it from doing so, it's money. At this point, we're ramping up local production, but for almost a year, we've been facing a scarce deficit of local government funding because the capabilities to produce are almost 3 times higher than the funding available. In other words, Ukraine has been capable of producing its own weapons, from a manufacturing standpoint, throughout Putin's special military operation. The one thing holding it back is that it hasn't been able to attract the investment needed to produce those weapons. That is now changing. According to Kamyshin, Ukraine and Denmark have come up with a novel mechanism that will allow Ukraine to build the Palyantsia, along with its other missiles, without having to worry about restrictions. Denmark is going to procure from Ukrainian manufacturers and donate to the Ukrainian army, claims the Minister of Strategic Industries. With this help, we can scale up faster because, as I told you, our capabilities are higher than the funding available. Ironically, the agreement to create this mechanism was made at the very UDCG conference during which Zelensky made his most recent plea for Western countries to allow Ukraine to use long-range weapons inside Russia. On June 14th, Ukraine's government portal website offered further details, including a quote from Troels Lund Poulsen, who serves as Denmark's defense minister. In addition to committing to support Ukraine's efforts to defend itself for the next decade, Poulsen said, "We are taking the lead in responding to a direct request from Ukraine to ensure that investments are made in Ukraine's defense industry in the near future." Ukraine's Rustem Umerov was also quick to laud the project. noting Ukraine's gratitude to Denmark for taking what he calls a great step in supporting the Ukrainian arms industry through direct investment. Denmark's investment is part of the BIZZARE Manufacturing Freedom Project, which aims to raise $10 billion for Ukrainian arms development by the end of 2024. The Danes' contribution is small compared to the goal, just $28.5 million, but the project as a whole offers Ukraine's allies a brand new way of supporting it. That will worry Putin. He has relied on Ukraine not being able to use missiles in Russia because those missiles come from countries that are wary of crossing a red line and provoking the Russian leader further. Now Ukraine has developed a mechanism through which countries can support its efforts to use missiles in Russia indirectly without having to provide weapons of their own. And that program is going to help Ukraine to develop the Palyanitsia, along with its other homemade missiles, so that it can take the fight to Russia. Speaking about the Palyanitsia to DW News, Alexander Kamyshin hailed it as a first-in-class Ukrainian product that's fully locally designed and manufactured. He also delivered a stark warning to Putin. That's the first one to go. Others will follow, and you will see how much we can make. In other words, Ukraine has more ideas in the pipeline. It just needs financial support from its allies to turn those ideas into reality. So what does all of this mean for Putin and his special military operation? For one, it means he can no longer rely on Ukraine only being able to fight against his forces on their own soil. That strategy was already thrown out of the window with the Kursk invasion, which has given Putin a massive problem he needs to solve as Ukraine continues to take and hold Russian territory. Following that up with an invasion of Belgorod means that Putin's headache turns into a full-blown migraine. He has to commit substantial amounts of soldiers and equipment to those areas to try and drive Ukraine out. Now throw Ukraine's Palyanitsia into the mix, along with the other missiles it's producing, and Putin has even more issues to counter. The war is no longer about him throwing man after man at Ukraine's fortified positions in an attempt to slowly steal territory out from under Zelensky's nose. Putin's own country, the country he claims to be able to protect as he projects his strongman image, is under direct threat. People are being evacuated, territory is being taken, and now with funding from Denmark and the likelihood of future funding from its other allies, Ukraine has developed a homegrown way to finally be able to use missiles deep inside Russian territory. That puts Putin's military installations close to the front lines at risk. Remember that the Palyanitsia is capable of hitting around 20 airfields in Russian territory already, and it could ultimately be the factor that forces Putin to the negotiating table. That has been Zelensky's goal all along. He has constantly called for tangible coercion of Russia to force it into negotiating a peace that will see Putin restore the land Russia has stolen from Ukraine, which includes Crimea. That coercion can't come from international pressure alone, Ukraine's leader believes, and now he has a weapon, several in fact, that nobody can stop him from using inside Russia. The Palyanitsia promises to completely change the face of the Ukraine war, to the point where it may be capable of ending Putin's special military operation. But what do you think about this unique combination of drone and missile? Will Ukraine be able to produce it in high enough numbers to truly threaten Russia? Are other countries going to follow Denmark's lead by donating to the BIZZARE Manufacturing Freedom Project? A Russian soldier is stationed inside a trench deep inside the Ukrainian region of Donetsk. Around him are more soldiers, all waiting for the command to storm the final mile stretch towards the next town. The battlefield is silent, except for the whir of small propellers overhead, like the sound of a small mosquito. Ukraine has started its counteroffensive. Seconds tick past agonizingly slowly as the soldier tries not to move, otherwise the drone's detection systems might pick them up and make him a prime target. The world, just like the soldier, stands still in those few moments as the whir moves back and forth, and then there's a boom. The soldier is alive, but the soldiers in the next trench weren't so lucky. The whirl of propellers grows distant as the drone retreats to be outfitted with another mine. You see, the Russian soldiers are not being bombed by long-range missiles or artillery. Instead, mines are being dropped on them by small drones, and ironically, the mines come from Russia itself. The Ukrainian military has made significant advancements in the way modern warfare is waged, and not by inventing new or more powerful weapons, but by repurposing old ones. In this case, the trick lies in using reliable and plentiful anti-tank mines not defensively, but offensively. The mine in question, the TM62, a Soviet-era anti-tank mine designed to be as simple and effective as possible. Weighing in at around 21 pounds, the TM62 contains around 17 pounds of explosive, usually TNT. It looks like a classic cartoon mine, a flat metal disc with a fuse on top. There are several different fuse types commonly used with the TM62, with the traditional pressure fuse being the most popular. Typically, the TM62s would be laid down by engineers and dug slightly into the ground, or deployed via a GMZ mine-laying vehicle to speed up the process. There's even a mine-laying helicopter that can cover huge swathes of ground with mines. But while the Ukrainians are also deploying the TM62 from the air with drones, the delivery method is quite different. In fact, it's another excellent example of Ukrainian wartime ingenuity. Rather than using traditional launchers and long-range artillery, Ukraine has started using drones as its primary ordnance delivery method, particularly as an anti-infantry and anti-tank tactic. Drone warfare isn't a particularly novel concept. It was first proposed all the way back in World War I, when both the US and the UK independently started development of the first military drones. But the first attempts were only partially successful. Early drones were no more than what would today be called glide bombs, explosives packed into a shell and put into a slightly more aerodynamic container that would either fly independently or be dropped from an airplane. These flying bombs were bulky and not particularly precise, which made them suboptimal, especially when deployed above Allied troops en route to the enemy. The chances of these bombs taking a sharp turn downwards and causing devastating losses from friendly fire was too great to ignore. As a result, drone development remained largely theoretical for the next several decades. The drone that you might be more familiar with is the American design that was used to great effect at the turn of the 21st century, particularly in the War on Terror. One of the hallmark models was the General Atomics MQ-9 Reaper, a remotely operated unmanned aerial vehicle or UAV in pretty much every sense. The drone looks more like a miniature airplane and has the ability to hold and deploy multiple missiles or bombs from its wing carriages. The drone's success in Afghanistan was mainly due to the enemy's lack of anti-air defenses and detection capabilities. This allowed the drones to fly pretty much unimpeded through enemy airspace and deliver their payloads effectively. But the war in Ukraine is being fought on a very different scale and thus requires a different type of drone. Enter the DJI Mavic, a series of commercial drones from China. These drones weren't designed for industry or wartime. They were meant to be simple and cost-effective cameras in the sky, with the ability to live stream a video feed to an accompanying device. They were designed for commercial purposes, to take photos and shoot videos for parties or advertisements. However, it quickly became clear that these small drones could be veritable powerhouses on the battlefield in Ukraine. These small quadcopter drones could be used to gather valuable information on enemy movements and formations. This is due to their being relatively silent, particularly compared to large aircraft or land vehicles. They're also maneuverable and, perhaps most importantly, cheap and abundant. Even some of the most sophisticated DJI Mavic models generally cost less than $2,000. This is an outrageously low price for military-grade equipment, especially considering the drone's versatility. So the Ukrainians started using the drone for more than just gathering intel, and that's how we arrived at the situation today, where drones are dropping anti-tank mines or grenades behind enemy lines. The construction of this deadly mechanism is relatively simple. It starts with the basic quadcopter drone, which is outfitted with a grappling system, typically custom-made or 3D printed to be as light as possible. The grappling system is designed to be released remotely by the drone operator, dropping its payload when the drone hovers over the target. Alternatively, the drone is outfitted with a latch that unhooks to release the ordnance when needed. A larger drone can also fit a tray made from a grill, such as those found in ovens, taped or strapped to the drone on one side and latched to the other. The mines lay flat on the grill. When the operator is ready to deploy the mine, they send a signal to unlatch the grill from the drone. In theory, the mine could fall flat onto the ground, provided that it's been dropped from a low height. But the DJI Mavic is a relatively small drone, incapable of hauling dozens of pounds of equipment, like an anti-tank mine. For this purpose, the Ukrainians have started domestic drone production using imported resources. The most common drone of this type is the so-called Vampire or Baba Yaga. This drone is based on another DJI design, the agricultural Agras T-line. Agras is a series of larger quadcopter drones, with the most recent models capable of carrying farming and fertilizing equipment weighing as much as 110 pounds. But considering the scale of the ordnance that Ukraine is working with, slightly older designs that can carry 50 to 100 pounds of equipment are perfectly suitable. The Ukrainians have adapted the base Agras chassis, or reverse-engineered the drones to fit 6 or 8 propellers. To improve their operational range to a couple of dozen miles, the Ukrainian drone designs add extra battery packs to the side of the drone and attach extra antennas to boost the drone's signal and allow multiple drones to combine their signals and data streams. The added gear has made the heavy drones slower and much less maneuverable than the base DJI Mavic. It also reduces the drone's maximum payload, with some specifications suggesting a limit of roughly 40 pounds. However, these drones can now carry modified TM62 mines or a host of other ordnance, such as grenades, mortar shells, or repurposed parts of anti-tank missiles. Additionally, the costs of making these drones are still significantly lower than dedicated seek-and-destroy military drones like the aforementioned MQ-9 Reaper. Plus, these drones have a vastly improved operational ceiling, able to hover at an altitude of 1,300 feet. So that's the drone covered. But what about the mine itself? Based on different images and videos circulating on social media, there are a few different mine designs in active use. Initial images showed mines with minimal modifications being held by drones, intending to be delivered directly onto the target. This is the most basic solution, but it's not that effective, as the mine's inertia and considerable weight can cause it to steer off target, especially if the drone is being deployed high above the ground. So the Ukrainians started modifying the mines. The most common modification adds a tail, so to speak, to one end of the mine in order to stabilize it. Typically, the tail is made from a PVC pipe with a piece of sawed-off plastic bottle at the end to mimic fans. This tail stabilizer causes the mine to fall roughly straight down and orient itself so that the modified fuse is typically the part that hits the ground first. The mine's fuse, which is traditionally a pressure plate designed to set off the mine at weights of between 330 and 1,100 pounds, can be replaced with an assortment of different fuses. For the drone's purposes, the most effective fuse detects changes in air pressure or impact, which detonate the mine when it reaches the ground. Alternatively, some videos indicate that these fuses have been replaced with traditional detonation fuses. This is supported by the fact that mines appear to have smoke rising from them as they fall, indicating that the fuse has been lit long before impact. This range of modifications, combined with multiple drone delivery systems, has allowed Ukraine to constantly stay one step ahead of Russia. If one type of system seems to have been solved by the enemy, the next drone can use a different fuse to change up the tactics and cause more confusion. This has been noted to be a particularly effective strategy in the ongoing war, in part because the Russian military has a stricter order and command structure than Ukraine's. Most Western strategists also consider the Russian military lacking in the ability to adapt to more nuanced, modern, or improved tactics. This is in sharp contrast to the Ukrainian military, which has been trained primarily by Western forces since the annexation of Crimea in 2014. Which is considered to be one of the starting points of the ongoing conflict. Of course, the drones carrying mines aren't infallible. As mentioned, one of the main reasons the American drones had so much success in Iraq and Afghanistan was because the local insurgents didn't have meaningful anti-air defenses and detection capabilities. In Ukraine, the situation is practically reversed. Russia is widely considered to have some of the most sophisticated anti-air defense systems in the world, perhaps even matching those in the US for national defense purposes. Throughout the war in Ukraine, both sides of the conflict have contested the skies by means of relentless aerial attacks. To boot, the Russians are also well aware of the kinds of drone tactics that Ukraine can use, as the DJI Mavic and its close cousins, the agricultural drones, are imported from China into Russia too. Additionally, China has been Russia's closest ally throughout the conflict, with some reports suggesting China has been selling weapons and technology to Russia despite sanctions from the West, albeit without any concrete evidence having been produced to substantiate the claims. Thus, Russia has implemented robust anti-drone tactics itself, including detectors, jammers, and anti-air guns capable of detecting and shooting down drones before they can reach their target. Additionally, the constant seesaw of the front line in Donetsk makes operations near active combat much riskier for the Ukrainians due to their lower overall numbers. This means that drone operator squads have to deploy their drones farther away from the front, adding to the travel time and distance that the drones must cover before they can release their payloads. The battery packs that are added to domestic Vampire drones can compensate for the extra distance, but the combined weight of the drone and the mine it's carrying quickly nullifies the effect. It's estimated that for every drone that Russia shoots down, around 8 Ukrainian drones fail to reach their targets simply due to their batteries running dry. Still, the drones that do manage to reach Russian positions can have a devastating effect, particularly due to the sheer range of ordnance that Ukraine can use with them. In essence, the drone war in Ukraine is based on the cost-to-effect ratio. In particular, drones carrying anti-tank mines are typically used to destroy enemy armored vehicles or other specialized equipment. The drones are designed to be as cheap as possible, unlike their targets. While the cost of anti-tank mines is now approaching tens of thousands of dollars per unit, they are available by the truckload in Ukraine. On the other hand, a Russian tank can cost millions of dollars and much longer to produce. In fact, it could be argued that the advancements in drone warfare have directly caused Russia to abandon the prospects of developing its next-generation tank. The T-90M was supposed to be replaced with the T-14 Armata that had more offensive and defensive capabilities and integrated electronic warfare systems. However, only a dozen or so of these tanks were produced before the war started. When Russia deployed the new tanks to Ukraine, the results were disappointing. The tanks didn't display much more survivability than the T-90s, making them even more expensive pieces of metal for Ukraine to target with comparatively dirt-cheap equipment. If a $1 million tank can be destroyed with a basic anti-tank mine dropped from a drone that costs Ukraine a small fraction of the price and takes just a couple of days to make, Russia's ability to fund the war could quickly start drying up. But there's another cost that became one of the main reasons Ukraine has continued using drones to carry mines and other ordnance: people. By using a drone that can be operated from a dozen miles away, the Ukrainians can strike enemy infantry positions without risking their own personnel. Considering that Ukraine has less than a third of Russia's total population and likely under half of Russia's active military personnel, soldiers dying for Ukraine is much more costly than for Russia. The versatility provided by using modified drones and mines in this way goes beyond taking out enemy infantry. In fact, the mine doesn't even necessarily need to detonate upon impact. With some additional modifications to the stabilizer, the mine should be capable of falling from a relatively small height onto the ground, where it can stay dormant until an enemy vehicle drives over it. This method of mine delivery enables the Ukrainians to deploy mines in areas that traditional mine-laying squads can't reach, behind enemy lines. This has created a back-and-forth mine-based form of warfare in Donetsk. When the Russian military moves forward with its tanks and armored vehicles, it needs to clear a path through suspected minefields. No sooner has it done so, the Ukrainian military remines the same area with a fresh batch of mines, typically from the air. So the next time a new Russian convoy arrives or repositions itself in the area, there's a new supply of mines in place to cause mayhem for them once again. Using mines on a convoy of vehicles is particularly effective, as taking out the lead vehicle leaves its shell on the road, blocking the path for the rest of the convoy. The other vehicles are forced to reroute or retreat, with both options leaving them vulnerable to more mines. Moreover, the manual labor involved in trying to move the destroyed vehicle out of the way is typically not worth the time or danger, as the soldiers are sitting ducks for long-range strikes from Ukrainian forces. The TM62 mines are not only being deployed via drone either. Their ubiquity in the current war has led them to become one of the most common ordnances used in Ukraine. For example, a TM62 has more than enough explosive power to destroy an enemy fortification or collapse a building. When combined with a time-delayed fuse, the mine turns into a satchel charge that can be deployed by infantry when needed. All a soldier needs to do is get close to the enemy position, light the fuse, toss the mine, and get clear of the ensuing explosion ASAP. Videos circulating on Telegram show multiple cases of troops using the TM62 in this way. The main targets in the videos so far seem to be trenches and buildings, where they're used to destroy fortified positions or kill the enemy infantry stationed in them. However, it should be noted that when anti-tank mines are used in this way, whether by drone or as a satchel charge, the targets are usually not tanks, ironically. This is due to the fact that even the larger Vampire drone is able to carry only a single mine. If the drone targets a vehicle and ends up missing, it doesn't have any more ordnance to drop. Mortar shells, on the other hand, typically weigh only a few pounds, and the Vampire drones can carry 3 or 4 of them at a time. Should a mortar shell miss the target, the drone can take a few minutes to reposition and then drop its other payload before flying off to evade the enemy's counterattack. Another reason for mines not being useful in some scenarios is their larger explosion radius. When used as a satchel charge, the mine creates a much larger explosion than traditional ordnance. If the fuse is set to a low timer, as some of the videos showing Russians using the tech indicate, there's a high risk that the operator will get caught by the blast or its after effects. For drone operations, this also means the drone has to fly at a height of at least several hundred feet above the target. The extra height greatly decreases the accuracy, but improves the drone's survivability. Against a moving target, however, the loss of accuracy can mean that the entire operation is a waste of time and money. Besides, the anti-tank mine is not even the best weapon to drop on tanks. This might seem counterintuitive, but it has to do with how Soviet tanks were designed. The T-line of the Soviet tanks, ending with the most recent T-90, all have heavily reinforced armor around and on top of the vehicle. When a drone drops an anti-tank mine, the mine's weight and inertia mean it's unlikely to hit the tank directly. While the explosive charge is potent, it might not be sufficient to destroy a tank if it strikes it indirectly. On the other hand, Russian tanks use an autoloader system for their main armaments. The system stores spare ammunition in a compartment below the main turret, keeping it away from the crew members. While this means that the tank can fire more rapidly and doesn't need a separate crew member to reload the tank, the compartment itself becomes a potential weak spot. Since it sits closer to the ground, an anti-tank mine detonated below the tank or a mortar shell dropping directly on the chassis below the turret can cause enough of a shockwave to detonate the tank's ammunition. Depending on how much ammunition the tank has left in the loader, the resulting explosion can completely obliterate the vehicle from the inside out. That's why the Ukrainians have used even smaller DJI Mavic drones with mortar shells to target tanks and vehicles specifically. This strategy shifts the cost-to-effect ratio even further in Ukraine's favor, since the small drones are much more readily available and can easily be replaced. In fact, there are estimates that Ukraine might be losing 10,000 drones per month, with roughly the same number in the air over Ukraine at any point during the war. This demonstrates how big an impact drones are making in modern warfare. Particularly since drones are much easier to replace than people, they're being used as both eyes in the sky and arms that drop bombs. But how do these drones locate their targets in the first place? The answer is, perhaps unsurprisingly, with even more drones. The Vampire drones don't have to be attack drones. Their improved antennas make them excellent signal boosters for short-range reconnaissance drones, a role that the DJI Mavics can readily fill if needed. Furthermore, Ukraine has its own industry producing long-range surveillance drones, the Skytons. Skyton Raybird 3 is a drone designed back in 2014 for intel and reconnaissance missions, and was adopted by Ukraine's armed forces shortly after. The Raybird 3 has an operational range of over 1,000 miles and is capable of flying for more than a day without needing to recharge. Furthermore, it only needs to be within 60 to 100 miles of a control center to receive active orders, meaning that it can fly about 60 miles behind enemy lines to scout for targets. The drone can also fly at altitudes of up to 11,500 feet, easily bypassing common anti-air defense systems, looking for drones closer to the ground. A photo appeared on Russian social media, showing a Raybird that had been felled near the Krasnodar region, which was around 130 miles behind the front line at the time the picture was taken. This indicates that the drone can feasibly operate even deeper into Russian territory. But the Raybird 3 is just one of the pieces that powers Ukraine's drone-based surveillance system, with real-time communications again reserved for the ever-present DJI Mavics. This system means that Ukraine can keep an eye on both current events on the front and incoming Russian supply lines to scout for potential targets. Once viable targets have been identified, the Vampires and smaller drones with grenades can be deployed to perform repeated drop-down attacks. The sheer scale of drone warfare in Ukraine creates disturbing implications for the future of modern conflict. Tens of thousands of drones working in tandem to create real-time coverage of practically the entire front line would mean that nobody on the battlefield is safe from death from above. Now consider that Ukraine started the war significantly on the back foot. The Raybird 3 is estimated to cost $450,000. That's a hefty sum, but pales in comparison with the famous MQ-9 Reaper, which has a price tag of over $30 million per unit. A country with a larger economy and military defense budget, like most NATO members, could easily replicate Ukraine's successful use of drones to create veritable drone armies. Drone operators could undergo years of training on simulations or even in real-life scenarios, making them much more common than in the Ukrainian and Russian armed forces currently. All of these factors combined could, and arguably should, inspire NATO members to rapidly modernize their military forces to include multiple kinds of drones. With drones at the helm of conducting offensive missions, the potential loss of lives of friendly troops is likely to be greatly minimized, and this could be the great equalizer in modern warfare. Considering China has an active military force of 2.3 million troops, while the US has only 1.3 million soldiers. A larger supply of drones and more advanced military technology could more than compensate for the disadvantage in manpower. But for now, the world will watch on as drone warfare improves by the year in Ukraine. Maybe the Ukrainians are building an even better version of the Vampire as we speak, ready to turn the tide of war once again. But what do you think? Will drones be able to save Ukraine in the war? And how will drone warfare impact the militaries of the future? Ever thought of strapping a helicopter rocket launcher to the back of a Mitsubishi truck? Well, as you can see here, Ukrainian fighters have. There is no escape from Ukrainian weaponized civilian Mad Max vehicles. But if you see something like this Soviet-era Volga sedan mounted with a remote-controlled 14.5mm heavy machine gun rampaging your way, you should definitely at least give it a shot. And if you think these trucks are strange, wait till we show you what this 1940 SVT-40 Soviet semi-automatic battle rifle can do. Don't be fooled by its vintage look. This gun is far from being ready to be retired. The Russo-Ukraine war has definitely been producing some of the weirdest weapons we've seen fielded in recent history, maybe even ever. But how weird can it get? Join us as we dive into this rabbit hole and reveal the good, the bad, and the downright strange weapons seeing use in Ukraine, starting with oldies but goodies. It's a common misconception that the newest weapons are the best in modern warfare. Futuristic weapons sporting next-generation designs and big capability promises tend to attract the most public attention, but the war in Ukraine has proven that it's the workhorses, the time-tested OGs, that actually get the job done. In Russia and Ukraine's case, Soviet-era weapons have dominated the battlefield primarily by virtue of their sheer availability and ease of use. This doesn't mean they aren't good. Ukraine's Soviet-era defenses like the S-300 and Buk M1 here, for example, seem to have done an excellent job blunting Russian firepower. The AK-74 and all its variants, such as the AK-74M, are excellent infantry firearms. Ukraine's well-maintained and updated T-72 and T-64 tanks, designs now well over 50 years old, continue to hold their own against Russia's newer iterations, or at least what's left of them. When upgraded with modern electronics and munitions, Soviet-era weapons can more than hold their own in the 21st century. This was the case with the Soviet Kh-35 subsonic anti-ship missile that Ukraine overhauled into its R-360 Neptune and used it to sink this jewel of Russia's Black Sea fleet, the Moskva, back in April 2022. There are other examples of Soviet-era weapons being overhauled, upgraded, and flat-out MacGyvered into menacing new packages. Look no further than the trusty RPG-7, the famous Soviet shoulder-fired, muzzle-loaded rocket launcher that has seen service all over the world, for a prime example. RPGs were designed to penetrate tank armor, though their cheap, mass-produced warheads have been used against emplacements, buildings, helicopters, and human targets since the weapon's introduction in 1961. With plenty of cheap RPG rounds at their disposal, Ukraine has adapted certain warheads for more effective anti-personnel use. Video evidence from early in the conflict showed a fearless Ukrainian demolitions expert taking an angle grinder to a live 82mm mortar round, loosening the stabilizer fins with a couple of hatchet blows, and fitting an adapter manufactured by volunteers, all to fit the mortar onto an RPG booster. No mobile mortar system, no problem. All you have to do is strap a rocket booster to a mortar round, like this, and you get a man-portable anti-personnel munition that can be fired from a 15-pound tube. Ingenuity at its best. If this shoulder-fired RPG mortar hybrid didn't get the job done, why not just strap a bunch of anti-personnel grenades in a radial pattern around the anti-tank warhead itself? Well, that was exactly the line of thinking for some Ukrainian frontline units hoping to add a bit more juice to their anti-infantry RPG lineup. Images of makeshift explosives surfaced online revealing just that, an RPG warhead with a half-dozen grenades fastened to it, a Frankenstein creation tailor-made for omnidirectional destruction. If the humble RPG is any indication, there are classics in use that are still very functional. And then there are classic throwbacks that are real head-scratchers. With the 75th anniversary celebrations unfolding around the globe, many weapons that played starring roles in World War II have been making their greatest hits comeback in Ukraine. Here are some of the most notable sightings. The Mosin Nagant M1891-30 and its successor, the SVT-40. Back in the heady days of 1891, well over 100 years ago, Captain Sergei Mosin chambered a 7.62 by 54mm R cartridge into his finalized bolt-action assembly after a decade of experimentation and pulled the trigger of a firearm that would ultimately become one of the most mass-produced military bolt-action rifles in history. 37 million Mosin rifles were built over the next 8 decades, as the rifle saw service in 42 separate conflicts, a remarkable testament to its durability, reliability, and versatility. As you might have guessed, the Russo-Ukrainian War is the latest conflict to feature the time-worn Mosin. Updated in 1930, long and carbine versions of the M1891-30 model, the self-same workhorse that helped deliver the Allied victory in the East during World War II, has been seen in service today with Ukrainian and Russian forces alike. Dating back to 2014, Ukrainian separatists in the Donbass regularly utilized the Mosin in sniper roles. Some were doled out to Russian conscripts from deep Soviet stocks after Putin's military mobilization last year. Several of the Mosin's eventual successors, the semi-automatic SVT-40, SKS, and the infamous AK-47, have also been seen in use. But this is just the beginning. The water-cooled M1910 Maxim machine gun. One of the strangest sightings in Ukraine actually predates the antiquated Mosin, if you can believe that. Somewhere, someplace, American inventor Hiram Maxim must have been looking on with an amused smile on his face when the armed forces of Ukraine wheeled his revolutionary M1910 Maxim machine gun out of storage. Yes, that Maxim gun, the world's first reliable, effective, mass-produced machine gun, and started using them back in the mid-2010s against the Russians in the Donbass. The Maxim was invented in 1884 and remained in production until 1945, widely adopted around the globe by imperial powers hell-bent on killing each other in 2 world wars and a host of other conflicts. The Soviets adopted it in 1930, and as the Soviet surplus often did after the fall of the Berlin Wall, 35,000 Maxims found their way into Ukrainian storage. Many of them were dusted off, mounted onto vehicles, placed at checkpoints and fortifications, and used in other ways to repel the Russian invaders. Sporting protective armor plates and 2 heavy wheels to add mobility and stability, the Maxim uses the same 7.62 by 54mm ammunition as many other Soviet machine guns. Capable of firing 600 rounds a minute up to 3,000 meters away, the heavy Maxim is certainly not the best machine gun option on the battlefield, but this great war-killing machine is still showing its effectiveness 131 years later. Old Man Maxim would be proud. Other vestiges of the past have surfaced too. Back in 1947, the Soviet Union produced its last PPSH-41, a workhorse submachine gun used by the millions during World War II. With its recognizable drum magazine and high rate of fire, the open-bolt burp gun fired 7.62 by 25mm pistol rounds and saw use after World War II in Korea and Vietnam. Certain photos showed PPSH-41s and the PPS-43, its stamped steel brother, in the hands of certain Ukrainian DNR separatist fighters and internal police units in the war's first few months, perhaps more a sign of desperation than utility. It wasn't the only World War II-era machine gun to feature though. The unmistakable DPM, DP-27 and 28, the mainstay Red Army light machine gun by 1945, have also been seen with their traditional pan, circular top-loaded machine gun chambered for the 7.62 by 54mm R cartridge. The DPM was eventually replaced by the more robust PK series of light machine guns that are seen around the world. But lead is lead, and clearly the dusty DPM can still hold its own from time to time. We're not sure how many of these are actually in use, but they are certainly there. Speaking of chunky, relatively unwieldy Soviet-designed firearms that refuse to die, Ukrainian soldiers have been seen firing 80-plus-year-old PTRS-41 and PTRD-41 anti-tank rifles from covert positions. These bulky metal rifles were designed from 1938 to 1939 and produced throughout World War II as a stopgap to help Soviet infantrymen stand a chance against German lightly armored vehicles. The gun was essentially an SKS on steroids. For such a relatively cheap weapon, the weapon's 14.5 by 114mm armor-piercing cartridges certainly did the job, penetrating armor plates up to 40mm thick from 100 meters away. Reportedly used off and on by militiamen in the Donbass firing World War II vintage ammunition since 2014, they are still seen on social media from time to time. There are a few honorable mentions on our list. Firearms spotted on the battlefield as old as the ones we've already spoken about, but whose actual use can't be confirmed. These include several Nazi weapons including the MP40 and STG-44 submachine gun, as well as the MG42, the lead-spitting beast whose modern variant, the MG3, remains in use in more than 40 countries. Ironically, while certain Ukrainian units used a Nazi-designed machine gun to repel Russian soldiers, early photos from the war showed American-built Lend-Lease Thompson submachine guns taken from captured Russian prisoners. It's impossible to know if this was a one-off sighting, but its presence makes odd sense, considering the United States shipped millions of Tommy guns to the Soviets, then fighting the Nazis back during World War II. Adding more American flavor to the hodgepodge of vintage firearms in Ukraine, if Russian state media is to be believed, the Ukrainians have been using US-made M101 towed howitzers firing 105mm shells on front lines near Zaporizhzhia, an artillery piece fielded by the US Army during World War II. These M101s were allegedly donated by Lithuania back in September 2022. What about imported flavors? 32 nations from tiny North Macedonia to Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden have all pledged varying amounts of military aid to Ukraine since the start of the war. Some countries, like the United States, can offer tens of billions of dollars worth of expensive vehicles, drones, munitions, and equipment. Others, like Portugal, donate grenades, small arms ammunition, some automatic rifles, and firefighting helicopters. That Ukraine has taken this jumbled admixture of arms and equipment and made it work speaks to their pluck and resourcefulness, traits the Western world has come to admire. In this deluge of aid, a long list of modern small arms have flowed into the country. Ukraine is unique in the annals of military history in that respect, an independent country whose rapidly revitalized military operates with such a vast range of amalgamated systems and platforms. Across the front lines, soldiers are now fighting with M4 carbines, M240s, M32 grenade launchers, and M2 Brownings, alongside smaller numbers of submachine guns donated by private American companies. Desert Tech sent its bullpup SRS-A1 anti-material rifle, an insanely accurate rifle that fires the powerful .338 Lapua Magnum round, while Keltec sent 400 sub-2000 9mm machine guns to make up for a civilian contract they'd lost track of. There's even been a sighting of a suppressed American Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle. To this list, the Ukrainians employ many foreign imports. Czech firearms like the CZ-805 Bren and the ZVI Falcon Op-99 anti-material rifle, British Starstreak laser-guided high-velocity air defense systems, futuristic-looking Belgian FN-2000s, German MP5s, and licensed versions of Israeli small arms like the Tavor and Negev manufactured by Fort, a Ukrainian firm based out of Vinnytsia. We've also seen next-generation variants of time-tested designs surface, like the bullpup ASH 12.7 and the Russian-made assault rifle or the AK-12, a fifth-generation Kalashnikov assault rifle introduced in just 2018. Unlike the AK-74, the AK-12 is chambered in the 5.45 by 39mm round, with the Russian variant capable of firing the 7.62, known as the AK-15. With its free-floating barrel, cheaper cost per unit, and stronger construction, the AK-12 features improved accuracy and resilience. Okay, let's get to the juicy stuff. The ripest field for weird weapons during the Ukraine war hasn't really been in a field at all. It's been in the air, where unmanned drones and cruise missiles rule the skies and deliver pinpoint destruction at the push of a joystick. Recently, a Russian Blackjack strategic bomber fired a Kh-55 cruise missile stripped of its nuclear warhead at Ukraine. Yes, you heard that right. They fired a nuclear-capable cruise missile, albeit an older one designed in the 1980s, with weighted ballast in place of its nuclear warhead. But why? The Kh-55 cruise missile was first designed in the mid-1970s. Fired from the belly of a Tupolev Tu-160 Blackjack supersonic bomber, the turbofan 200 kiloton yield cruise missiles were the spear of Russia's nuclear deterrent for decades. It may seem strange, but firing an inert nuclear cruise missile makes some sense. Increasingly, as Ukrainian air defenses improve, Russia has seen less success bombarding civilian infrastructure. Cruise missiles are expensive, and Russia seems to be running out. Using older air-launched Kh-55 missiles plucked out of storage might be Russia's way of trying to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses without wasting money on expensive missiles that get intercepted or miss their mark. Russia has tried to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses in other ways too. Back in March 2022, Ukraine released photos of a partially destroyed mystery munition, resembling a dart released from an Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile. The strange devices were each a foot long, painted with an orange tail, and contained a heat source but no explosive warhead. The findings were puzzling. Experts believe the darts to be bomblets on part of some sort of cluster munition package. Later, they revised their thesis, arguing these dart-like munitions were some sort of penetration aid, a Cold War-era device used as a countermeasure to help primary ballistic missiles reach their target. The darts worked as decoys, like the Kh-55 cruise missile mentioned earlier. Loaded up with electronic jammers and heat sources, they can attract missiles, fool radars, and foil infrared seekers. Jeffrey Lewis, professor at the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California, claimed it was a very curious decision by the Russians to use decoy missiles, considering that at that stage Ukraine still lacked the military capabilities to successfully shoot down Iskander missiles. These penetration aids were highly classified for decades, making their subsequent discovery an intelligence bonanza for the West. Another mysterious impact crater, this one far from Ukraine in the Croatian capital of Zagreb, made the world wonder what on earth the Russian military was up to 1 month into its invasion. On March 10, 2022, an unmanned aerial vehicle overflew Romanian, Hungarian, and Croatian airspace, flying 430 miles per hour at 4,300 feet before careering into a Croatian school campus and crashing into soft ground. The local residents were fortunate. The drone landed just 160 feet from a highly populated student dormitory. Incredibly, nobody was hurt. Initial theories claimed it had been a Ukrainian army recon drone. Inspections of the surviving wreckage painted a different picture. The presence of Cyrillic markings and a Soviet Red Star insignia prompted an American analyst to identify the aircraft as a Russian Tupolev Tu-141 drone, an unmanned aircraft used since the 1970s. Subsequent investigations revealed that the drone was indeed carrying a warhead. Nobody ever found out whether it had been a Russian drone or was in fact an off-course Ukrainian drone that ran out of fuel. Either way, the crash sparked an international incident, with residents and politicians from several NATO countries wondering how such a drone could so effortlessly penetrate their airspace. But the drone story doesn't end there. Russia has employed plenty of drones to observe and attack Ukrainian civilian and military targets. One of the most unique iterations has been the BIZZARE KUB-BLA Kamikaze drone, a short-range loitering munition manufactured by a subsidiary of the Kalashnikov company. The KUB-BLA, measured with a wingspan of 1.2 meters, can carry a 3-kilogram payload and travel 130 kilometers per hour. It has a maximum range of 40 kilometers and a flight time of 30 minutes, so it can't be employed far beyond Russian positions, but it can make use of AI technologies on approach, making adjustments and identifying its static target. Several KUB-BLA drones were intercepted over Kyiv in the early days of the invasion, sparking theories that they were being used to target Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and decapitate the Ukrainian government. Some of the most interesting drone footage captured during the war, however, doesn't come from military drones at all. It comes from the cheap, commercially produced drones that the Ukrainians have jerry-rigged for all manner of missions. Using 3D printers, a soldering iron, cheap hardware, and some plain old-fashioned ingenuity, Ukraine's army of commercial drones have now been retrofitted for offensive service, and to great effect. It took lots of experimentation and refinement to engineer a light enough grenade to knock out enemy armor using nothing but altitude and gravity. Very quickly, Ukrainians succeeded in engineering lightweight munitions that did not affect a drone's flight path whatsoever. A real engineering masterclass. War is economy. It's money. One Ukrainian soldier commented on the rationale for making everyday drones more lethal. If you have a drone for $3,000 and a grenade for $200, and you destroy a tank that costs $3 million, that's very interesting. Interesting indeed. Makeshift air-delivered care packages have gone on to achieve global renown, both the deadly and the benign. Viral videos show deft Ukrainian drone operators conducting the wartime equivalent of a basketball trick shot, landing grenades in open tank hatches, underground air pipes, narrow trenches, and populated foxholes from hundreds of feet in the air. In other settings, drone modifications have been shown being used to transport small packages of sugar to frontline soldiers, and even most recently, to steal an enemy radio set from a dead Russian soldier that was subsequently used to listen in on enemy plans for several days. The Ukrainians have thanked their Russian enemy for their default Lend-Lease program. Abandoned and salvaged equipment, most of it virtually interchangeable with what they already carry into battle, provides an ongoing boon to Ukrainian military effectiveness. But not all strange and unique weapons are captured intact. While the Ukrainians will make use of the captured firearms and other weapons for a long time to come, vehicle debris recovered after a skirmish almost a year ago revealed a destroyed Russian prototype tank many believed to be one of a kind. Video footage from a March 17, 2022 clash showed the burnt-out remains of a completely unique tank, a T-80 UM2 Black Eagle. This particular Black Eagle was in bad shape. Like so many before and after it, its autoloader had taken a direct hit, which promptly exploded and blew its turret clean off. It was an interesting find. The T-80 UM2 was once part of a next-generation tank development project, codenamed Object 640, or Black Eagle. The first iteration of the main battle tank appeared in 1997. At the time, Russia touted the experimental, modified T-80U as something that would easily hold its own against Western main battle tanks like the M1A2 Abrams. It boasted Cactus Explosive Reactive Armor (ERA) panels on its front hull and track skirts, a welded steel turret, anti-fragmentation screens around the main gun, and eventually, DROSD-2 Active Protection System, a radar-operated anti-rocket and missile fragmentation defense net that can disable incoming munitions 20 to 30 feet from the tank. Unfortunately and predictably for Russia, the project never got off the ground. The T-80 UM2 never entered production, and the prototype became a trial platform for new systems until, in early 2022, it was lumped into a Russian military column, ambushed north of Kyiv, and utterly destroyed. Perhaps Russia was keen to test out its capabilities on the modern battlefield. At any rate, one of the only tanks deployed to Russia so far to feature an anti-protection system didn't fare well. Remember that saying, desperate times call for desperate measures? Having now lost over 1,600 confirmed tanks in battle, 536 of them captured outright by Ukraine, Russia's real strategy has been to scrape the bottom of the barrel for dilapidated and poorly maintained Soviet-era surplus in its stocks, hastily modernize them and ship them off into the meat grinder for use by ill-trained conscripts and mercenaries. Recent images on social media, for example, show several BRDM-2MS 4x4 armored reconnaissance vehicles being overhauled at Russia's 103rd Armored Repair Plant near Chita in Siberia. However, the BRDM-2MS isn't much to write home about. It's an updated version of the BRDM-2, a Soviet amphibious lightly armored vehicle introduced into service back in 1966. Fitted with a coaxial 7.62 machine gun and a one-man turret with a 14.5mm KP-VT machine gun, mechanics were shown outfitting the paint-chipped vehicle with new thermal sights and, hopefully, a new coat of paint. Which again begs the question, why? Given the rate of vehicular destruction in Ukraine, operating the four-man BRDM-2MS will be like riding a tin box into battle against the likes of the modern AT-4, Javelin, or NLAW. Yes, it's nice to have wheels when you're an infantryman, but all the time and energy spent modernizing or perhaps more accurately, restoring a vehicle that will barely stand up to Ukrainian artillery, mines and tanks, much less the far cheaper Western anti-tank missiles commonly employed across the front, just seems counterproductive, like Putin's entire war. Yes, it may just be for show. Perhaps it may even excel in a behind-the-lines transport role. Nobody knows just how many BRDMs will see combat. But if they are deployed to the front, one Twitter user observed that Russia's upgrades are tantamount to having an 82 Honda and slapping a backup camera to it. They certainly won't protect their occupants. We do know that the same repair plant has modernized oodles of Cold War antique T-62s of all types, the same ones seen on railway cars headed to the front at various stages of the war thus far. Most of these museums on tracks, culled from deep storage, have not seen combat in decades, if at all, and their maintenance records reflect that fact. Most are being fitted with new engines, thermal imaging, bulkier armor, new comms, and better optics. The mere presence of the T-62 in Ukraine, 20,000 of which were being mass-produced during the Cold War from 1961 to 1973, shows how depleted Putin's starting lineup of T-80 and T-72 tanks has become. Attrition has forced him deep into his reserves. The number of T-72s in storage are reported to be far lower than anticipated, many of them mothballed and unsalvageable. T-62s are often used by reserve units in the east and thus kept in better condition. But if they get deployed to the front, no amount of cope cages welded onto the T-62 chassis will be able to protect these relics from destruction. Think of what would happen if all of a sudden the United States Armed Forces started wheeling M60s out of storage and slapping modern equipment onto them. Sure, it could do something, the same way a T-62 can. If deployed to fortify an occupied town or doled out as a training implement, it could provide some utility. But as David Axe, a Forbes defense writer, said it, there's no evidence the T-62s played any meaningful role in the fighting. There's ample evidence their four-man crews abandoned the tanks at first opportunity. The Chita plant has allegedly been tasked with refurbishing 800 T-62s by 2025. As you may have noticed, this list of the strangest, weirdest weapons in Ukraine isn't exactly short, and it's hardly exhaustive. Ukrainian soldiers have reportedly captured one Russian prisoner armed with a Chinese-made single-shot pellet rifle. There is also that iconic image of a Russian Rosgvardia member guarding a checkpoint in Kherson with an antique 12-pound Napoleonic-era cannon. It could all be a joke, a stunt for social media, or a decoy to fool the Ukrainians. Either way, it's surreal that so many historic and head-scratching pieces have made their way onto the battlefields of Ukraine. In Ukraine's battle for air supremacy with Russia, a swarm of tiny Black Hornet drones might just give it the edge. These drones act as eyes for Ukrainian troops on the ground, and thanks to the US, UK, and Norway, Ukraine now has an entire fleet of them ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. In July 2023, the United States announced that it would deliver $400 million in security assistance to Ukraine. Beyond the typical armored vehicles and air defense missiles, that package would also include Black Hornet drones made by Teledyne FLIR Defense. A month later, the UK made a similar announcement. Working with Norwegian manufacturers, it would spend $9 million on these micro-drones, sending them over to Ukraine for use as covert surveillance tools. All told, Ukraine now has over 1,000 of these drones at its disposal, and they're helping Kyiv slowly turn the tide against Putin's invading forces. But how? How could a tiny drone, designed to look like a helicopter, have such a huge impact? To answer that question, we must start by asking the following. What are Black Hornet drones? The simple answer is they are miniature unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, that are designed specifically for reconnaissance. Unlike many of the other drones that Ukraine uses, some of which come equipped with attack capabilities, the Black Hornet drone is all about stealth. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to its superpowers. The first generation of these drones was created in 2011 by Teledyne FLIR and quickly found themselves in heavy use in Afghanistan. They're designed to be small enough for ground-based troops to carry. They even come with their own carry case, and they can be deployed at a moment's notice. In Ukraine's case, they've received shipments of the Black Hornet 3, which measures just 6.6 inches from nose to tail and weighs only 1.16 ounces. In other words, they're tiny. So tiny, in fact, that the drones are easy to hide among foliage and trees, making them almost imperceptible to opposing troops unless the drones are flown straight into them. Furthermore, the drones are designed to be practically silent when in operation. The telltale buzzing that usually accompanies these types of UAVs isn't present, making it even harder to detect the Black Hornet. Also, unlike other drones, the Black Hornet does away with the quadcopter design that's typically used for UAVs. Instead, it looks like just a tiny helicopter, only one that's equipped with several high-definition cameras that are capable of sending footage to the operative controlling the drone. That design choice also means that Black Hornets can squeeze through much smaller gaps than quadcopter UAVs, ideal for sneaking into buildings and navigating difficult terrain. The Black Hornets have an impressive 25-minute flight time, giving the user plenty of time to get in and out with the drone, and takes about the same amount of time to recharge. As a result, the drone can be deployed several times per day, with each flight revealing more about the area over which it flies. But all of that tech doesn't come cheap. The most recent publicly available pricing for the drone puts it at $195,000 per unit. Given that Ukraine has received about 1,300 of the drones since the beginning of Putin's war, that would mean that Kyiv's Black Hornet fleet has cost $2.73 billion to date. That's a lot of money to spend on a fleet of tiny helicopters. But it's money well spent once you recognize the extent of the Black Hornet's abilities. First, there's the simple ease of deployment to consider. Unlike traditional drones, which often need to be launched from the ground and will weigh down any troops carrying them, the Black Hornet is so tiny that it can be launched from a soldier's hand. Seeing one take off is almost like watching somebody launch a toy helicopter. Just place it on a surface and hit a button. The drone zooms into the air to be directed by the soldier's remote control from the ground. That simplicity makes it a weapon of immense power. Granted, the Black Hornet has no attack capabilities, meaning it isn't a weapon in the traditional sense, but the fact that it can be launched by anyone from almost anywhere gives it a level of versatility that most drones simply don't offer. A platoon of soldiers could send several of them into the skies in an instant, giving them a clear bird's-eye view of the terrain below. And when the Black Hornet is done, it can be landed right back on the soldier's hand and tucked into a pocket. However, the miniature nature of the drones does come with some downsides. When the British first started using the Black Hornet in Afghanistan in 2013, they found that something very simple could cause issues: a gust of wind. According to one soldier, a good gust of wind will send the Black Hornet off, meaning that Ukraine's soldiers face some limitations when using them. Still, those limitations aren't quite as severe as what the Brits faced. Back then, the Black Hornet weighed just 16 grams, making it easy to knock off course. The third generation of the device, the one being sent to Ukraine, is a little heavier and is now capable of standing winds of up to 17.3 miles per hour. That's more strength than the Black Hornet used to have. However, according to the Beaufort wind scale, a 17.3 mile per hour wind qualifies as a moderate breeze. If the wind is strong enough to raise dust from the ground or rustle loose paper, it's probably strong enough to knock a Black Hornet off course. Rain can also be an issue. According to Teledyne FLIR's specifications document, the Black Hornet can handle precipitation of 0.1 inches, which qualifies as a light rain. Anything above that means the rain is so heavy that the tiny drone can't fly properly, meaning it's best deployed when conditions are clear. Still, it has a solid temperature range of between 14 and 109.4 degrees Fahrenheit, making it usable in freezing cold conditions and extremely hot locations. Having a weapon that can be overcome with a decent gust of wind or a little bit of rain might not seem like the best idea in the world. But the Black Hornet makes up for that design issue, which is inherent in something as small as the drone, with amazing stealth capabilities. The drone comes equipped with a set of tiny electronic motors that are battery-powered and combined with the aerodynamic design to make it extremely quiet when it's in the air. The drone is practically silent, with almost none of the telltale buzzing seen in other UAVs. That's ideal for its use to surveil hostile environments. Even a slight amount of background noise serves as enough cover to make the Black Hornet drone almost impossible to hear. According to engineering.com, a soldier will have no idea it's even there as long as the drone stays more than 10 feet away from them. That near silence is complemented by a smart design to emphasize control. Assuming the drone flies in relatively windless conditions, its slight wing shape, coupled with a design inspired by birds and insects, means it can be controlled almost perfectly. The drone can turn on a dime, with little to no build-up needed to get it to navigate corners. Again, that makes it useful in stealth operations, as a soldier can quickly fly the Black Hornet around a corner or behind a tree to prevent anybody from being aware of its presence. The vortex generators installed on the Black Hornet's wings play a large part in improving the drone's handling. These generators create small vortices of air localized to small portions of the wings that allow for easier control when the drone is moving at slow speeds. The generators also reduce stall speeds, allowing the user to quickly slow down and, when conducting surveillance, to have the drone hover in place so it can get clear shots of its surroundings. Better yet, the drone can fly up to heights of 1.5 kilometers, approximately 0.93 miles, again allowing for quick escapes. Then there are the Black Hornet's image capturing capabilities to consider. The drone often comes in sets of two, with one being equipped with cameras to capture daytime footage while the other specializes in shooting footage at night. The unit comes with a pair of electro-optical, or EO, cameras, one at the front and one that shoots footage below the drone that can capture video at a 640 by 480 resolution. If a soldier wants to take photos of the environment, those EO cameras can send back pictures with a resolution of 1600 by 1200, strong enough to record even the smallest of details on the battlefield. The thermal imaging cameras built into the nighttime versions of the drone aren't as powerful. They deliver video and images at a resolution of 160 by 120. That's enough to get a general idea of how many troops may be in a location, for instance, though not detailed enough to deliver any specifics. All imagery and video can be recorded or streamed live to a tablet operated by the user, with the Black Hornet having a radio range of 1.24 miles. That's more than enough for covert operatives to maintain their distance from a target while surveilling it. Best of all, every scrap of the drone's recorded footage is encrypted and stored on a 64GB SD card that can be easily removed or replaced as needed. The same goes for the cameras, all can be replaced with spares if they happen to go offline for any reason. The manufacturers have gone to great lengths to ensure that the cameras are easy to use. With the tablet that comes with the Hornet, a soldier can simply tap a screen to take a snapshot, all while watching streamed video. It's almost like playing a video game. Using the tablet and a remote control, the user moves the drone around, hitting a button to take snapshots whenever they're needed. But what if a soldier doesn't want to put themselves at risk while controlling the drone? Thanks to the Black Hornet's advanced artificial intelligence, or AI systems, they don't have to. Each Black Hornet comes equipped with an autonomous navigation mode that allows the user to pre-program a flight route into it. That programming means it can fly to its target without being directly controlled, with the drone even having the ability to return to its dock automatically when it senses that it's running out of juice. The AI built into the drone is also able to adapt to changing environmental conditions. That's ideal if wind or rain pushes it off course. Using its AI, the Black Hornet can course correct, so it gets back onto its intended flight path. This autonomy is achieved through a small array of onboard sensors built into the drone, which help it to detect obstacles nearby so that it doesn't accidentally collide with them. Advanced GPS built into the drone also makes it easy to set a route. Simply choose a location, and the drone can use its GPS systems to figure out the best way to get there. All of that data that the Black Hornet picks up via its sensors is fed through complex AI algorithms, enabling it to fly safely without anybody being in direct control. There's even an optional visual-based navigation unit that the drone can use to fly indoors when it has no access to GPS. So it's an impressive piece of technology. But how has Ukraine been using the Black Hornet? The clear and most obvious use is for reconnaissance and surveillance. As Ukrainian troops advance on Russian positions, they can deploy the drones ahead of themselves to get the lay of the land before they launch operations. And thanks to the drone's high-resolution cameras, they can track Russian troop movements easily, figuring out the best times and places to strike. Think about this potential scenario. A Ukrainian platoon advances to the edge of a Russian position. Hiding out of sight, a soldier launches a Black Hornet, and sends it flying high above the Russians, where the drone spends about 20 minutes recording footage and sending snapshots. Immediately, the Ukrainians can see how many soldiers are stationed at the Russian position, as well as get detailed imagery of artillery and other weapons. They'll also see weak points. Any gaps in the Russian defense can be picked up by the Black Hornet, with the drone being small enough to fly in and out of buildings, as well as around rubble, to locate an ideal attack position. And as one drone runs out of power and has to return to the soldier who launched it, another drone can be sent into the skies to replace it. That's where the drone's small size becomes a massive advantage. According to The Economist, a single Ukrainian platoon has 20 soldiers. Each of these soldiers could easily carry a Black Hornet, delivering about 400 minutes of surveillance footage per platoon. A small fleet of Hornets could easily surveil an entire Russian station in minutes, with the footage being stitched together to reveal everything about what the platoon will face when it launches its attack. The Russians would have no idea that the Hornets are even above them. It's this ability to surveil that also helps Ukraine to knock Russian jets out of the sky. The Black Hornet is so tiny that it simply doesn't show up on a jet's radar, and even if a pilot spots it, the jet won't be able to do a thing to destroy the drone. The Black Hornet is far more maneuverable. Before the pilot could even adjust their jet to fire on it, the drone would be gone, likely heading back to its user. And just like that, the Ukrainians would know exactly where the jet is and the flight path it's taking. The Russian pilot would have two choices: either abort their mission and turn back, risking the wrath of Moscow by failing to complete their objective, or carry on flying, likely into Ukrainian anti-air defenses, and risk losing their plane and their own life. It's a lose-lose situation. Assuming the pilot even sees the Black Hornet tracking them, the likelihood is that they won't, meaning the Ukrainians can launch their anti-air attacks before the pilot even realizes what's happening. These scenarios aren't outside the realms of possibility. According to the European Council on Foreign Relations, or ECFR, Ukraine used the larger TB2 drone to help it target the initial Russian convoy that tried to ride into Kyiv. It's also believed that a TB2 was used to distract the defenses of the Moskva ship, giving Ukrainian soldiers enough time to fire the naval missiles that ultimately sank the Russian vessel. With the Black Hornet, Ukraine has an even smaller drone at its disposal, one that will help targeting without ever being spotted by the enemy. Consider also the propaganda uses of the Black Hornet. Recording footage of Russian troop movements may be useful for Ukrainian attacks, but it also shines a light on what those troops are doing as they advance. Every atrocity committed, every civilian killed. If a Black Hornet is present, it can all be filmed and distributed, helping Ukraine to make an even better case for why the rest of the world needs to help them overcome the Russian threat. And thanks to the Black Hornet's high-resolution snapshots and high-quality video feeds, there will be no doubting any of the footage the drone shot. Again, this is a proven Ukrainian tactic. Kyiv has used drones to document the destruction of several Ukrainian cities during the war, as well as the breaching of the Kakhovka Dam. It also uses drones to record its own attacks against Russian ships, tanks, and jets, all valuable morale-boosting propaganda to spread among its forces. There's also the simple fact that using drones protects troops. In the case of the Black Hornet, that's been a proven benefit of these UAVs since they were first deployed in Afghanistan. Newsweek made that clear when it shared the comments of Major Adam Foden, a British soldier who used them during his time fighting against Afghan insurgents. Previously, we would have sent soldiers forward to see if there were any enemy fighters hiding inside a set of buildings, he said. Now we are deploying Black Hornets to look inside compounds and to clear a route through enemy-held spaces. Ukraine is doing the same. Every Black Hornet deployed accounts for one soldier who doesn't have to risk their life to surveil a Russian position. Ukraine gets to protect its troops, who can stay over a mile away from a Russian position, while still receiving a clear video feed that shows them exactly what they need to know. This risk reduction means that a Ukrainian platoon doesn't have to take any chances and lose valuable members just to figure out how to launch an attack. It can use Black Hornets and attack at full strength every single time. However, using the Black Hornet doesn't come without risk. That was made clear in a July 2023 article published in Bulgarian Military, which said that soldiers from Russia's Wolves Brigade, a reconnaissance unit, had captured two of the drones. Both were seized during a shootout in Novaya Tavlzhanka that resulted in the Russians managing to retain the trophy control complex. That was a significant event. The Black Hornet is made using proprietary technology to which the Russians don't currently have access. Teledyne FLIR isn't selling to them, which means they can't fill the skies with swarms like the Ukrainians can. Yet. Now that they have a pair of these drones, Russia can try to reverse engineer them to figure out the science and tech behind how they work. Whether they'll be successful or not is another matter. The Black Hornet uses encryption to protect the videos that it shoots, so you have to assume that it has even more powerful encryption guarding the AI algorithms and subroutines built into its system. But even if it takes Russia years to come up with its own version of the Black Hornet, the fact that it has the tech in its hands makes the process a little more straightforward. And even if Moscow decides not to go down the reverse engineering route, it can at least use this pair of Hornets. It can figure out their capabilities and, possibly, figure out a way to counter them. Or with more captures, it may be able to build up a small fleet that it can use to plan attacks of its own in the future. The Ukrainians could start to see their own tech being used against them if they're not careful. Still, the use of Black Hornet drones has been a massive boom for Ukraine in its fight against Russia. The tiny drones have enabled Ukrainian soldiers to get the jump on Moscow's finest in more than a few conflicts, and have been valuable for capturing footage used for reconnaissance and even propaganda purposes. The only question we have left is simple. What does the future hold? Right now, the Black Hornet is relatively harmless in terms of its attack prowess. In short, it has none. There are no weapons built into the drone, meaning it exists solely to capture footage and shoot photos. But the potential exists to make it a much more dangerous device. Imagine a world where Teledyne FLIR decides to build a version of the Black Hornet that doesn't have a full array of cameras. Instead, they load it up with an explosive device, one that can be triggered from over a mile away, or thanks to the AI algorithms in the drone, programmed to explode once the Black Hornet reaches its location. The drone would become a silent killer. By the time the target realized that the drone was even there, it would be practically on top of them. It's only visible from 50 feet against a perfectly clear backdrop. You can only hear the minor buzzing the drone produces if the Black Hornet is 10 feet away. Could we see the war delve into scenarios where soldiers are constantly on the lookout for these miniature drones, taking potshots at any they see to prevent them from causing serious damage? Perhaps militaries will start to counter these drones with new tech that surrounds their installations with simulated winds and rainwater, preventing the Black Hornets from penetrating. Only the future will tell. For now, the Black Hornet is one of the most powerful weapons Ukraine has at its disposal, even if it's not technically a weapon. It gives troops clear sets of eyes in the sky, eyes that can work day and night, that provide valuable information for missions. Added to the many other drones that Ukraine is using, as well as the many that its civilians use to capture footage for their own military, and Putin's war may go down in history as the first to truly feature drone warfare. So what do you think about the Black Hornet? Is this impressive little device everything that it's cracked up to be, or do you see flaws that could be overcome in the future? Maybe you have some other ideas about how it may be used to Ukraine's advantage. Ukrainian sharpshooters have proven very effective in their fight against Russian invaders. It helps that they have the biggest sniper rifle in the world in their hands, one which has some of the longest kills on record and which can penetrate most types of armor at long ranges for cheap prices. What is this rifle? How have Ukrainian forces used it? And what does it say about the future of the sniper? Let's take a look. Warfare has changed dramatically through the past 3 centuries. What was once an activity that relied on mass fire to compensate for the inaccuracy of early small arms and artillery has gradually become more precision-based as weapons become more accurate over longer distances. The rise of the sniper in the late 18th century, thanks to the advent of cheaper rifled barrels, is one of the best early examples of precision targeting in warfare. Demand for snipers has been high in conflicts ever since the American Revolutionary War, where they helped to turn the tide of critical battles like Saratoga in 1777. Snipers first proved their effectiveness on the battlefield against individual enemies, especially officers, which were easy to target because of the ornate uniforms that they wore. The increased range and accuracy of small arms forced officers to wear plainer clothing by the end of the 19th century. After proving themselves in the anti-personnel role, snipers began to use even larger firearms loaded with special-purpose heavy machine gun rounds to target enemy vehicles like supply trucks or even tanks. Although tank armor became too strong for these weapons to damage in World War II, anti-material rifles are still effective against a wide variety of other targets. Thanks to the advent of these rifles, the sniper became a threat not only to men on foot but even to those who were riding inside vehicles like armored personnel carriers. The sniper's effectiveness as a force multiplier continued to increase, although sharpshooters still often lacked weapons that could serve all of their needs. Early snipers tended to be hunters who were singled out for their roles thanks to their experience. This is why most sniper rifles, even into the 1970s, were adapted from hunting rifles. But such a dynamic limited the development in the kind of ammunition they could use. Things started to change in the 1980s. One of these changes was the further evolution of the sniper's increasing anti-material purpose. This was the time when the famous American .50 caliber Barrett sniper rifle was invented by a Tennessee man named Ronnie Barrett. The use of the Browning machine gun round for this weapon gave the sniper much longer reach and power, increasing the diversity of targets that could be destroyed. Dedicated sharpshooters used to targeting enemy infantry would also have a go-to weapon that could be used to target vehicles. Recruitment and training methods for snipers also started changing at this time. Typical sniper training in modern armies can take a year or more, and Ukraine was once no exception to this. However, because they are so badly needed at the front, Ukraine's sniper schools have given candidates a crash course that can be completed in a few weeks. The war in Ukraine has proven that in this age of precision artillery and drone surveillance, snipers need weapons that are accurate over increasingly long ranges to be effective and to ensure their survival. Fortunately for Ukraine, one of the weapons it has in its arsenal is the SnipeX Alligator, and it's the longest sniper rifle in the world, with a length of 6 feet 6 inches when it's fully assembled. Experts have described this weapon as one which makes even previous anti-material rifles like the M107 Barrett seem like pea shooters in comparison. What are the specs of this weapon? Let's take a deep dive. The SnipeX Alligator is a domestically produced rifle that made its debut in June 2020. The rifle is manufactured by a company called BIZZARE, which was founded in 1991 in Kharkiv, Ukraine. The company has since expanded internationally with headquarters in Germany and the Netherlands. It's a nanotechnology-based chemical company that specializes in ceramics, lubricants, oil, and fuel additives, not to mention firearms. BIZZARE is an experienced manufacturer that has over 1,600 items in its company product line. 2 of them are the anti-material Alligator and T-Rex rifles. The Alligator has a barrel length of 47 inches, which is more than twice the length of a typical hunting rifle designed to engage targets at long distances. Even the Barrett M107's barrel is small by comparison, at 27 inches. The rifle has a mass of 25 kilograms, weighs 55 pounds, and is chambered for the 14.5 by 114mm anti-material round. This round, which has a mass between 59 and 66 grams and a weight of about 2.2 ounces, originated in the Soviet Union during World War II. There it was used as the ammunition for the KPV heavy machine gun and in anti-tank rifles like the PTRS-41 and the PTRD-41, weapons which have seen some use in the Ukrainian conflict today. Since World War II, this round has been used internationally in other anti-material rifles, anti-aircraft guns, and in the machine guns mounted on armored personnel carriers. The 14.5 by 114mm round comes in several different varieties, such as tracers, armor-piercing incendiary, and high-explosive incendiary. The Alligator's effective range is 2 kilometers, but it has a maximum range of 7 kilometers. To make it more accurate, BIZZARE designed it as a bolt-action rifle. This reduces the tilt of the battle, which would be significant for a round of this size if it was firing in semi-automatic mode. The Alligator's receiver is made of steel and its bolt guides are chrome-plated, which reduces the amount of dirt and grime built up in the barrel as a result of repeat firing. The rifle comes with a detachable box magazine that can hold 5 rounds inside. The muzzle velocity is almost 1,000 meters per second, nearly Mach 3. A trained shooter can fire 12 rounds per minute. The Alligator can be used to attack dynamic as well as static targets. The Alligator has a design that compensates for the large recoil of its round in several ways. First, its sheer weight absorbs much of the energy and keeps the weapon steady, preventing the operator from feeling its full effect. Second, it comes with a recoil-isolating buttstock and a 4 or 5 baffle muzzle brake. Third, the shoulder stock is padded to reduce the wear and tear on the operator, although experts believe that this measure is likely ineffective in reducing recoil itself. The rifle has a height-adjustable cheek rest that can be installed on either the right or left side. It also comes with a carrying handle that can be changed depending on if the operator carries it with a mounted silencer. To facilitate the transport of this weapon at longer ranges, the Alligator's barrel can be detached quickly from the main body. The rifle and barrel can be then stored alongside one another in a compact transport case. To increase its accuracy, the Alligator can come equipped with different sighting devices and features a floating barrel that whips naturally under recoil. A folding 4-position adjustable bipod and rear-adjustable monopod come with the rifle too, in order to further stabilize it when it shoots. The Alligator also has a little brother, the SnipeX T-Rex rifle. which is essentially the same device, but this one is in a bullpup configuration without the detachable magazine, meaning it can hold only one round at a time. Both the Alligator and T-Rex rifles are coated with a special paint called Cerakote. Although it might sound trivial, this is an important attribute in their durability. Cerakote is a ceramic paint coating that provides enhanced protection against the elements. Firearms coated with Cerakote show fewer signs of wear and tear by becoming more resistant against corrosion and abrasion. Cerakote also provides better protection for the weapon when it's exposed to potentially degrading chemicals, meaning that it can be fielded for longer and under tougher conditions before requiring repair and replacement. Prior to the advent of Cerakote, the preferred way to keep firearms protected from corrosive materials and the elements was through stainless and blued steel finishes. While this helped in many ways, the material did not hold up well in watery conditions, which are common in a frontline deployment. To protect these weapons against water, water-repellent oil was traditionally required. Cerakote solves the same problems that stainless and blued steel finishes did, while also being protective against water. Cerakote coating can be finished in different colors, enhancing the concealability of the rifle, a crucial factor for the success of any sniper. Cerakote coating cannot be done on its own, however. It requires a trained gunsmith to apply it. Ukraine's gunsmiths are therefore likely coating the Alligator with Cerakote as the mission requires for the troops using it. In January 2021, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense announced that it would adopt the Alligator into service based on satisfactory test results. It claimed that the Alligator showed the ability to accomplish missions that current sniper rifles would not be able to do, all while managing recoil to an acceptable level. The rifles began to be introduced into use in March of that year. The arrival came just in time to be deployed in significant numbers to counter the Russian invasion that came a year later. Reports have circulated that British Special Operations soldiers have been training Ukrainian snipers in how to use the new sniper rifle. It remains to be seen if this means that the British Ministry of Defense is considering adoption of the weapon for the United Kingdom's armed forces. So far, no foreign nation has introduced the Alligator or the T-Rex into official service. It's not known how many of these rifles have been deployed in Ukraine, but it's likely that Ukrainian Special Operations forces have made use of it in significant numbers in missions against high-priority targets. There are also likely sharpshooters armed with it in the regular infantry divisions on the front lines. Perhaps as a testament to its ability to absorb recoil, some of the women serving as snipers in the Ukrainian armed forces have been seen using the Alligator. One of the more famous images of this weapon is with an unidentified woman holding two of the rifles upright, revealing how much taller they are than her. The barrel, especially with a silencer attached to it, is so long that it even looks to be at least a head taller than most of the men who have taken pictures with it in the upright position. The Alligator has made its mark on the battlefields of Ukraine in a few notable instances. The weapon reportedly saw its first significant use in the Battle of Mariupol between February and May 2022. There, the controversial Azov Brigade, which has been linked to neo-Nazi ideology and which Putin has used as an item in his propaganda justifying the war, was reportedly using the Alligator to deadly effect against Russian forces before the battle ended in the city's steel plant. In November 2023, a Ukrainian soldier named Vyacheslav Kovalsky set a new record for the longest confirmed sniper kill while using the Alligator. He took out a Russian soldier at a distance of 3.8 kilometers, 2.5 miles. This kill easily broke the previous record, which came at the hands of a Canadian Special Forces sniper in Iraq in 2017 with a range of 3.5 kilometers. That was not the only notable feat of an Alligator in the hands of a Ukrainian sniper. Unfortunately, not much else is known about this incident. A year earlier, another Ukrainian sniper whose name is not known used his Alligator to kill two targets at a range of 2.7 kilometers, 1.8 miles. It was reported as the second most distant confirmed sniper kill at the time, behind the Canadian sniper shot. This incident is better known because there's a video of it. The Ukrainian military's Strategic Communications Office uploaded this video to Telegram on November 13, 2022. In the video, a Russian soldier is seen walking through a tree line with a sniper following him through the site with night vision equipped. According to Popular Mechanics, the sight was likely at 20 times magnification. Once the Russian soldier stopped walking, the sniper fired once. About 3 seconds later, the target fell. Another Russian soldier who ran in to aid his fallen comrade was then targeted and shot. The time for the bullet to arrive to the targets, when measured against the weapon's known muzzle velocity, likely makes the video and the shot an authentic display of the Ukrainian sniper's prowess, and not an item of propaganda, as other sources were claiming. Despite these spectacular anti-personnel feats, the Alligator sniper rifle was designed primarily to serve in an anti-material role, rather than targeting individual enemy infantry. The long range at which this rifle is designed to engage its targets ensures that specific enemy personnel will be comparatively difficult for operators to reach, although the rifle can disrupt movement and formations of infantry by providing harassing fire from several kilometers away. The Alligator can also be used to destroy some obstacles impeding the movement of friendly infantry, such as wooden constructions or concrete walls. The Alligator is best suited to destroying light vehicles, fortified positions like dugouts, communications equipment, radar stations, ammunition and fuel deposits, air defense systems, and aircraft on a runway or in a hangar. These targets are much larger and easier to shoot from a long distance. There are even reports that the rifle is accurate enough at long ranges to target helicopters in flight, although there are no confirmed instances of such an engagement. The material targets the Alligator is designed to destroy are expensive. Anti-material rifles like the Alligator and its smaller cousin the T-Rex therefore assist Ukraine in waging asymmetric warfare against its larger and more deep-pocketed attacker. The rifle's round can hit its target with 23,380 pounds, about 12 tons, of force, over twice as much as that which would come from a .50 caliber Browning machine gun round. This is far more than enough force to destroy a cinderblock wall. Any enemy soldier getting hit by such a round would be turned into mincemeat. According to SnipeX, the rifle can penetrate 10mm steel armor at a range of 1.5 kilometers. That's enough force to punch through the side armor of Russian armored personnel carriers like the BTR-80, putting all of the troops inside in danger. According to the Oryx blog, Russia has lost 1,196 armored fighting vehicles as of February 19, 2024. 802 of them have been destroyed. It's also lost 3,435 infantry fighting vehicles and 397 armored personnel carriers. These estimates are likely understatements because Oryx only counts visually confirmed losses. It's not known how many of these losses came at the hands of Ukrainian snipers using the Alligator, but Ukraine's defenders, having access to a powerful and cheap anti-material weapon, is certainly responsible for part of the destruction that Russia has faced. More lightly armored targets, like supply trucks, are easy prey to the Alligator's round. Ukrainian snipers armed with it have undoubtedly used it to disrupt the columns supplying Russian forces, increasing the logistical difficulties that the Kremlin's armies have suffered during the war. A video released on September 29, 2022, demonstrates the Alligator's anti-material function. The video showed a Ukrainian sniper using it to engage an armored target from a distance of over 2 kilometers. The target in the grainy video was identified as a Russian tank. The sniper landed at least one shot on the vehicle, with the video cutting shortly afterward. Although the vehicle was not destroyed or showed any signs of significant damage, it demonstrated the range at which a trained Alligator operator could fire with effect, and the grave danger that it poses to more lightly armored Russian vehicles. The danger increases the closer the sniper gets. At 100 meters, the Alligator's round can penetrate 30mm of steel armor, putting heavier units at risk, although this would also put the sniper in far greater danger. Escaping after a shot while carrying such a long and heavy load will not be easy. For this reason, most sniping missions with the Alligator will come at longer ranges. Part of the reason for the importance of the Alligator's anti-material function is that it's a much cheaper option to destroy these targets than other portable anti-armor weapons. For example, a Javelin missile can cost $80,000 apiece. The launcher itself runs into 6 figures. These pieces of equipment also require a sophisticated supply chain in order to manufacture and transport, which means their numbers will necessarily be limited. In contrast, the Alligator will cost 4 or 5 figures. The rifle's precise price tag is not listed. There are also millions of 14.5 by 110mm rounds available to use, and it's easy to manufacture more of them locally. The presence of the Alligator allows for Ukrainian forces to avoid using expensive Javelin or NLAW rounds on lower priority targets, saving them as they were intended to be used against enemy main battle tanks. This is another way that the Alligator's presence assists Ukraine's asymmetric fight against Russia. As good as it is, the Alligator comes with dangers to the operator. We've mentioned its length and weight potentially making escape difficult, and that's not the only thing a sniper using it needs to worry about. Although it can carry a silencer to reduce its profile, the muzzle flash created when firing a round is huge. One commentator compared its brightness to that of a hand grenade going off. Even with a flash suppressor, it's an easy profile to make out, so the sniper will be vulnerable after having taken the shot. This is why the rifle is designed to engage targets at such long ranges. Such distance is one of the only ways to ensure a good level of safety for the sniper using it. Although it is notable that in a 2021 training video released by the Ukrainian military, the flash profile of the weapon was much lower when it was equipped with a silencer. The arrival of the Alligator and T-Rex on the battlefield shows that the role of the sniper continues to evolve. Ranges are getting longer, with the record for the longest recorded sniper kill changing hands more frequently in the last decade. Anti-material snipers have also shown their importance in modern peer or near-peer conflicts. Precision missiles, artillery shells, and rocket-based anti-tank or anti-aircraft munitions get depleted rapidly under such conditions, with both sides in the conflict suffering from a shortage. Users will therefore need to be careful in how they decide to use their sophisticated precision ammunition. The response to this reality has been to go retro. In many other ways, old is new. For example, Ukrainian forces have relied on old-style flak cannons to shoot down Iranian Shahed drones, because using sophisticated missiles to do so is an uneconomical use of resources. The Alligator demonstrates the same principle against targets on the ground. The sniper will always be a danger to enemy personnel, especially against high-value targets who aren't being careful. However, it is in the anti-material role that snipers of the later 21st century might see their most effective use. Will the snipers of the future, armed with weapons like the Alligator, prove to be a danger to increasingly more expensive pieces of enemy equipment for cheaper prices?
What's Russia's biggest nightmare in this war? Not tanks, not missiles, it's something far smaller, but far deadlier. The UJ-22 Kamikaze drone is wreaking havoc where it hurts most, slipping past defenses to strike Moscow, ammunition depots, and vital infrastructure. For the Kremlin, it's not just a weapon, it's a message. Nowhere is safe. But what makes this drone such a relentless threat, and why can't Russia stop it? The answers uncover a weapon so ingenious it's reshaping the battlefield and forcing Putin to confront a nightmare he never saw coming. Now, Ukraine has used drones to attack targets in Moscow before, but on the night of November 10, 2024, it launched its largest such attack to date. The Russians announced that they had shot down at least 34 drones near Moscow. The attack injured several civilians and interrupted dozens of flights, but Moscow wasn't the only target. The Russian MOD said it intercepted 84 drones in total. The Ukrainian General Staff said the strikes included an ammunition dump in Bryansk, which is about 235 miles southwest of Moscow. This attack demonstrated Ukraine's ability to hit targets across a broad expanse of Russian territory with its drones. But the success of Ukraine's attack raises an interesting question. With Moscow being so important, why were any of Ukraine's drones successful in breaching its air defenses? Moscow has two layers for its air defense: the A-135M strategic missile defense system and the S-50M, which includes the S-300 PM2 and S-400 and the BIZZARE self-propelled anti-aircraft weapon. But these layers of defense, with their powerful radars, are designed to target incoming missiles and aircraft. Ukraine's drones, in comparison, are challenging to detect by radar because of their smaller size, low speed, and materials they're manufactured from. Drones are often made of plastic, with only small metal engines powering some of the larger ones. These are not stealth drones per se, but their materials reduce their radar signatures. The BIZZARE is ordinarily the system of choice against drones. BIZZARE systems have destroyed more than 300 Ukrainian drones. However, detecting Ukrainian drones has also proven a challenge for it. The radar systems have to cut through the normal interferences they can expect in urban environments that can make drones difficult to distinguish from other phenomena. Russian systems have mistakenly targeted large flying birds. Russia also faces the problems Ukraine has faced when it dealt with Russian-purchased Shahed drones made by Iran. Using expensive missiles to shoot down cheap drones is not an effective use of resources in a war of attrition. This is why the Ukrainians have begun to make use of old-style flak cannons against the Shahed. Russia has also moved some of its air defense systems further south from Moscow to support efforts in the war. In January 2023, air defenses were installed on the roofs of buildings in the city, indicating a shortage. Because of the sanctions, the weapons sent to the front will be harder to replace. Ukraine naturally kept quiet about where it launched its drone attacks from, but it's possible that its agents in Russia used them against specific targets that they knew the location of beforehand. Ukraine has repeatedly demonstrated its ability to carry out sabotage attacks deep into enemy territory. A recent example came in late September when Ukraine's military intelligence agency, the GUR, damaged a minesweeper ship in the Baltic. Ukraine has proven itself a master at these tactics, and it's likely that its agents have been active using the smaller FPV drones it's employed to such great effect on the front lines. But when it comes to penetrating multi-layered air defense systems, it's necessary to have more than one option. Fortunately, the Ukrainians have many long-range drones they can use against targets deep within Russia from their own territory. With this in mind, the question about the recent Moscow attack is, who done it? We can begin with a domestic design called the UJ-22, called the Airborne. This drone resembles a miniature aircraft. One would be forgiven for thinking it has similarities with the planes in the skies of World War I. The UJ-22 is both a reconnaissance and an attack drone. For reconnaissance, it has a 64-megapixel camera that feeds its images back to its operators in real time. In attack mode, the drone can be armed with a warhead to make it a kamikaze device, or with up to 44 pounds of droppable unguided bombs. The type of bombs include up to 4 82mm mortar mines or 6 adapted rounds from the RPG-7. The Airborne can stay flying for up to 6 hours and has a range of 500 miles. It's 12 feet long and has a wingspan of 14 feet. Ukraine was using this drone from at least March 2022. On the 30th of that month, Russia's MOD published footage of the destruction of a UJ-22 via its Pantsir air defense system. The UJ-22 has also been attacking Moscow from at least February 2023, meaning that it could have taken part in the raid on November 10th. The Ukrainian drone crews aren't content to just show off their throwback designs though. There's another long-range drone in fashion among them. Meet the AQ-400 Scythe. It has tandem wings and a box-like fuselage. The range is shorter than the UJ-22, topping out at 465 miles, but it can deliver a higher payload of up to 70 pounds for a standard mission and 154 pounds if there's a target at shorter ranges that the Ukrainians want to see gone. A similar idea, though, with yet another design, comes in the form of the AN-196 Liati, Fierce. If you see this and think you're looking at a Turkish Bayraktar TB2 drone, you're not far off the mark. This drone can carry a payload of 50 kilograms. The Liati is one of the primary weapons of choice for a Ukrainian drone unit attached to the GUR that has a dedicated mission of targeting Russian territory. This unit hit an ammunition depot in Toropets between Moscow and St. Petersburg in September. The Ukrainians claim that this depot stored artillery shells, glide bombs, and Iskander missiles. The fires were visible for miles. Footage of the AN-196 being shot down on November 10th confirmed that this drone was used in the attack on Moscow, meaning that it has a range of about 375 miles at least. If you need to hit targets at really long range though, go for the UJ-26 Beaver. This drone can fly up to 620 miles with a payload capacity of 44 pounds. This drone was introduced in 2023 and entered mass production by December of that year. It can cruise at a top speed of 125 miles per hour. The Ukrainians have used the Beaver to attack Moscow on several occasions. Such incidents include a strike on high-rise buildings in the summer of 2023, and possibly even an attack on the Kremlin itself. The Beaver is essentially Ukraine's version of the Shahid 136, although it has a lower range. Speaking of the Shahid, it fell victim to another Ukrainian competitor this last spring. The A-22 Foxbat is another domestic design with a propeller. If you were thinking this one looks like a vintage propeller plane too, you'd be right, because the drone is probably a variant of Ukraine's Aeropract A-22 Foxbat Ultralight. This aircraft is normally designed for recreational flights, but the Ukrainians have adapted it to a remote-controlled UAV for very long-range missions. Perhaps that's recreation of a different sort for Ukraine's drone pilots. Compared to the Airborne, this one seems to be a specialized kamikaze weapon. If you're a Ukrainian commander, you'd prefer it if long range is what you really need. On April 2, 2024, this drone hit a factory in Yelabuga, Tatarstan, which reportedly manufactured Shahid-type drones. The hit occurred 870 miles behind the front lines, which means this guy is more than capable of hitting either Moscow or St. Petersburg. How do we know it was responsible for the attack on the Shahid factory? Well, because it was captured on video in good detail. Its profile stands out. But Ukraine has more tricks up its sleeve. What if the mission requires something faster? The Ukrainians might have been denied the ability to use traditional cruise missiles, but the solution? Turn a drone into a sort of cruise missile. Meet the UJ-25 Skyline. This is a jet-powered drone that was first confirmed on the battlefield in December 2023, when it crashed onto the roof of a house in the Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk. This one has a one-way ticket, as the UJ-25 is always a kamikaze drone. The UJ-25 is the evolution of the earlier UJ-23 Topaz. The manufacturer, Ukrojet, claims that the Topaz has a range of about 250 miles, a cruising speed of 370 miles per hour, and a top speed of 500 miles per hour. The war zone postulates that the upgraded Skyline has twice the range of its predecessor, long enough to reach Moscow. The shape of both the Topaz and Skyline suggests that these drones have additional stealth qualities. These include the chine lines around the fuselage and the recessed intake at the top. In addition to the new drones, the Ukrainians have displayed a penchant for finding new purposes in old Cold War equipment. At the beginning of the war, Soviet anti-tank grenades were used with small drones. Early in 2024, Soviet-era S-200 air defense systems were used in offensive roles to shoot down Russian aircraft, including valuable AWACS planes. Well, who would have guessed that Ukraine could make use of Soviet UAVs too? The Tu-141 drone was introduced in the 1970s as a reconnaissance craft. It has a range of 620 miles. These drones are monsters weighing 7 tons, but they have jet propulsion and can reach velocities of 600 miles per hour. Ukraine began using it in 2014, but when the full-scale invasion began, the defending forces saw these behemoths as a convenient source of improvised cruise missiles, which can fly at altitudes as high as 20,000 feet or as low as the tree line. The first successful use of these drones as a cruise missile came on December 5, 2022. 2 of them struck 2 bomber bases 300 miles inside Russian territory. However, only 152 of these UAVs were made, spanning the years from 1979 to 89, so these would likely only be used against the highest priority targets that Ukrainian intelligence deems have a good chance of suffering successful hits. Ukraine has another missile drone, the Palyanytsia. The first images of this drone were released on August 25, 2024 by President Zelensky, who announced that the weapon had seen its first successful use in combat the day before. Although Zelensky said that the 24th was the debut date, it's possible that the drone was part of the arsenal that attacked the Savoslayka air base on August 14th. The attack was 413 miles away from the Ukrainian border. The drone, named after a form of Ukrainian bread, is essentially a lightweight cruise missile. Few details are known about the drone, but it's likely a turbojet-powered projectile with a warhead of about 44 pounds and a range of between 310 and 435 miles. It combines lifting wing, electronic control, and jet technology in what appears to be a unique way, according to Alexander Dmitriev, who advises the commander of the ground forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on UAVs and information technology. Ukraine's digital transformation minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, claims that the Palyanytsia costs less than $1 million per unit. Although this is cheaper than a typical cruise missile, it's still more expensive than other drones, which means Ukraine will probably be selective in how to employ this munition. So aside from the Lyati, whose presence was confirmed, any of these drones could have taken part in the recent attack on Moscow simultaneously. That Ukraine has so many available is a good indicator of its drone industry's health. The attack of November 10th was likely not a coincidence. On the previous evening, Russia and North Korea signed the new Mutual Defense Pact and Comprehensive Strategic Partnership that they agreed in June, amid American intelligence reports of 3,000 North Korean troops deployed to Russia. The North Koreans are training at various facilities there, with Washington warning that they would be fair game if they came to Ukraine. Russia wasn't silent about the Ukrainian drone raid. It launched 145 drones at Ukraine on the same night. Ukraine said it shot 62 of them down. Targets of the Russian attack included the important city of Odessa. Russia has been forced to recognize the growing threat of Ukrainian drones after completely ignoring the problem before the war. The police in St. Petersburg have since created an anti-drone team, and the municipal authorities in Moscow banned civilian drone flights in May 2023 to ensure they could keep track of what was going on in the skies. Russia claims that it's developing laser and microwave weapons to add to its air defense network, but these are unlikely to be introduced in the near future. Reliable data in an authoritarian country like Russia is hard to come by, but the Levada Center, which monitors public opinion there, recently found that 54% of those surveyed favored immediate peace negotiations, with 38% opposed. There has also been wide opposition to additional waves of mobilization, which has forced Putin to increasingly turn to foreign mercenaries to make up for the shortfall the elevated casualties in Ukraine are creating. The Putin regime has felt the need to increasingly crack down on dissenting voices too, to make sure everything continues going smoothly. However, only 20% of respondents in the Levada poll said that Russia should make concessions to Ukraine in a bid to end the war. This data point indicates that even though an increasing number of Russians want to see the war come to an end, they do not want to give up the territory that the special military operation has acquired. Putin cannot easily give this territory up either, because doing so will be tantamount to a confession that his people have suffered for nothing. It would end any claim to legitimacy that he has among his people, who have implicitly agreed to permit his authoritarian rule in exchange for protection and tangible gains.
This is why the drone attacks on Moscow are so critical for the Ukrainian cause. The best way to tip public support against Putin and the war is to repeatedly attack Russia's largest and most influential population centers, and to prove to their people that he cannot protect them. Vladimir Putin has ruled Russia for longer than any autocrat since Joseph Stalin. Stalin supposedly said that one death was a tragedy, while a million deaths was a statistic. There is in fact little evidence that this phrase came from him, but Putin has nevertheless taken something like it to heart in this war. Russia might suffer as many as 1.5 million casualties over the next few years, according to Britain's top general, Sir Roland Walker. However, as long as those casualties are out of sight and out of mind, the residents of Moscow and St. Petersburg, the centers of power in Russia, will stay comfortable. Making them more uncomfortable is Ukraine's best way to win the war. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians, their Western allies have proven less than cooperative in making this happen, to Kyiv's understandable frustration. But Ukraine has increasingly demonstrated its inventiveness in finding ways out of its operational straitjacket. From the beginning, Ukraine has used drones to do damage that only much more expensive weapon systems had inflicted before. It's devastated Russia's once-feared tank fleet with much cheaper weapons than other tanks or advanced anti-tank missiles like the Javelin. It's decimated the Russian Black Sea fleet, not with other ships, submarines or anti-ship missiles, but primarily with drones in the seas and skies. Ukraine's FPV drone pilots have gotten so good that they can specifically target high-level officers in the Russian army for a much cheaper price than a precision rocket or even an artillery shell. So it shouldn't surprise you that Ukraine has been increasingly able to substitute drones for cruise missiles. When 2024 began, President Zelensky made the production of 1 million FPV drones a top priority for his country's defense industry. By February, Ukraine was already set to surpass that goal. In 2025, Ukraine's drone industry might well have an even more ambitious objective: produce enough drones to pose a constant threat to Moscow and St. Petersburg, in the same way that Russia's Shahed drones have threatened Ukrainian cities, with a mind to finally end the war on terms far more favorable than it can accept now. What do you think is coming next in Ukraine's drone war?